Okay. Hi, welcome to the gun room. Blimey, it's packed. Look at it, brimming. We're going to go through the season. We're going to look at the top, the bottom. We're going to look at some of the teams, how we thought they performed. We're going to actually bring some analysis to Mikel Arteta's reign and see what we think of that. We're going to pick the manager of the season, and we're also going to pick the player of the season. With me, you know the usual suspects. You got Mitch there, you got Jay down there, but you got Richard Butler from Over and Over and Over Again, Arsenal podcast, and you got Paul Mc Parlan, author of The Forgotten Champions, 86 to 87, isn't it?
Yes, and I'm wearing that shirt, Tom.
Ah, good man. Right, as I say, we're going to look at all sorts of things. Let's look at Chelsea first, because that's quite an interesting one to start with, isn't it? They were expected to really kick on this year. What's happened? Why didn't it kick on? Well, obviously, there's the Abramovich factor. We'll talk about that. Richard, what's your views on Chelsea? What happened there? Why did the wheels come off?
Well, I mean, you say the wheels come off. They did reach 2 cup finals and finish third. It's not exactly a disastrous season, is it? I mean, I think most clubs in the Premier League would have swapped with Chelsea the season that they had to everybody else. I mean, apart from Liverpool and Man City, who are still that level above, I mean, Chelsea were the best of the rest. I don't think it was as bad a season as it was maybe been made out. I mean, yes, they're unlucky in the 2 cup finals, but they lost on penalties to Liverpool both times. I think in the league, it seemed to be quite obvious that once they lost a couple of games early on, Liverpool and Man City, they were never going to be able to catch them. And I think Tuchel maybe put his focus on the cups and the Champions League as well. And maybe they lost a little bit of, once they'd secured the top 4, which they looked as though they had quite a long time ago, they almost went through the motions a little bit in the Premier League, didn't they? Because they couldn't have come any higher than third. That was pretty much where they were going to finish. And it was just a matter of making sure they did enough to see off the challenges just behind them. And then they did that in the end reasonably comfortably. So, I mean, it wasn't a bad season for Chelsea. They just, like everybody else, they're not quite as good as Liverpool and Man City, are they? And they'll need to improve. Yes, I think the stuff off the pitch with Abramovich did have an impact to a certain degree. They found it hard to win games at home, didn't they? They drew a lot of games at home. They lost to us. They lost to Brentford. They lost a few games. Unusually for them, because usually Stamford Bridge has been a fortress for them. So that was a little thing that they need to look at for next season, improve their home form. And again, they had a lot of home games where they couldn't sell tickets, could they? It was just season ticket holders only. So the atmosphere was a bit strange, and maybe all those things together. But overall, to come third, reach 2 cup finals, and only get knocked out of the Champions League by the eventual winners, having that second leg, they played really well, didn't they? They were a bit unfortunate to get knocked out. So I don't think their season was that bad. It's just maybe compared to, obviously winning the Champions League the year before, stuff like that, is obviously not going to look as good, is it, on the CV of Tuchel when he didn't win a trophy. But ultimately, when you look at it overall, I don't think it was a bad season for them, really. Just 1 or 2 things here, and they improved their home form. Obviously, there's going to be some players. Lukaku was a big disappointment. But overall, I don't think it was a bad season for Chelsea. And I'm sure they'll look on that as something they can build on to move forward, as opposed to it being the end of something. It could be the start of something else, because I still think Tuchel's a very good manager, and I do think he will bring a lot more success to Chelsea if he's given the time, which in the past their managers haven't been, have they? I mean, by now they'd have been sacked, wouldn't he, if Abramovich was still there, probably, for finishing third and reaching 2 cup finals. So if he gets a bit of time, I'm sure he'll be successful at Chelsea, because he's a good manager. He showed that, didn't he, winning the Champions League straight away, really. So yeah, I mean, maybe people have gone a little bit in on Chelsea a little bit more than perhaps they deserve, because I thought they had a decent season overall.
Jay, Lukaku, what would you do? Get rid of it? He's a bit of an enigma, isn't he? He looks in certain teams that he's blossoming and he's doing the business, and then you get him back to Chelsea and he just kind of dries up. He's gone through that United phase again. What's going on with that fella?
Yeah, they obviously splashed a lot of money on him, and he was obviously their main focal point up front, and it's just not worked for him. I think the longer it goes on, maybe he's just not suited to the league, and they'll probably look elsewhere, because Chelsea's not really the type of club to give players too long, are they? If they're not working, so. I mean, their team wasn't too different from the team that won the Champions League last year, apart from him. And didn't really work out. I'm sure. I mean, they're Chelsea, aren't they? They're an absolute juggernaut these days, and they're going to sign players, and they're going to come again. Yeah, I mean, Lukaku's a funny one because in that FA Cup final against Liverpool, he's up against Van Dijk, and I thought he had a few moments where, a few flashes where he sort of shrugged off Van Dijk, and he got a few shots away, and there's obviously a player in there, but I don't know whether it's sometimes with Lukaku, especially, if he's not 100% fit, if he's, because he's such a big guy, he can come across a bit sluggish and at the very top level, elite level, when you're built like that, you can look a yard too slow, can't you? I remember Alex Ferguson used to talk about Rooney, and he used to describe Rooney as, if he wasn't absolutely 100% fit, he was a yard slower, and and I think that's the case with Lukaku. He's got to be on it. He's got to be in absolute tip-top shape to be effective. But I think in the long run, I think Chelsea will probably sell him, and I mean, I don't think they'll recoup anywhere near the amount of money that they paid for him. But
we know how that feels, Mr. Pepe.
yeah. But I mean, that's the one area, I suppose, with Chelsea that they do struggle a bit, because Werner's not really looked any good, has he? He's looked a bit, in front of goal especially, he's a bit wasteful. So yeah, I expect this summer Chelsea to really address that position and probably get rid of Lukaku, really.
Paul, what have you made of them? Where would you improve, or who would you get rid of?
Well, I think, we already discussed here that Chelsea haven't scored enough goals this season, I don't think. I think they've scored by 20 less than City and Liverpool. And certainly the move for Lukaku didn't quite work out in the way they were anticipating. It's quite interesting because at the start of the season, I thought Chelsea looked like really, really strong contenders to take the Premier League title. And I remember watching a few of the games where commentators were drooling over Lukaku's performance, often using the phrase he's bullying defenders. Defenders are terrified of him. And he never quite maintained that level of performance throughout the season. And we mentioned about Timo Werner just doesn't score enough goals this level. I mean, if I was in charge of Chelsea, I'd be more inclined to give it to Werner than Lukaku, because I think that there's still a player there in Lukaku if you can design your system to bring out the best of him. I mean, Chelsea are still World Club champions, aren't they?
Yep.
So yes. So in terms of analysing the season, that's
second-rate mob, aren't they?
yeah. So I think, as Richard said, it's not been a totally bad season for them. I think where they have stepped up is they've dropped too many points against teams lower in the table. So I think Chelsea didn't lose once against Liverpool this season. They played them 4 times, yet they dropped 4 points against us. So I mean, you can see there where their problems are. When you get a piece of home 4-1 by Brentford, then there's obviously something not quite right with the system, the club, the players, motivation whatsoever. I think from a Chelsea perspective, although they have had a decent season, it's certainly the light years behind both City and Liverpool at the moment, I think. And I think, as Richard said as well, they chose to concentrate on the cups rather than the league this season. And they weren't looking in the Champions League. They almost got through against Real Madrid. So I think this next season is going to be a really, really pivotal season for Chelsea in terms of where are they? Are they going to be also rounds compared to City and Liverpool? Or have they got enough about them now the takeover has come into place to purchase the players they need to push them up to challenge for the top 2 places? And although it might not be a popular view here, I think there needs. I would love to see Chelsea or somebody else challenging for the top 2, because we're getting like Scotland was in the 90s here, with just 2 teams dominating the league season after season. And unless we start to break that, then most teams' ambitions is going to be, can we get a European place? And for someone like me who grew up watching football in the 60s and 70s, that really doesn't appeal to me that much.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult, isn't it? Because you've got the top 2, then you've got the next sort of handful all fighting for 3rd and 4th, and then you've got this interesting stuff at the bottom, the relegation. Mitch, can the Chelsea fans actually sort of say it's this Abramovich thing that's been going on? He's almost been flung out the country, hasn't he? Is it fair to say that their season deteriorated after all this hubbub?
I think that definitely had a role in it, but I think they're like title aspirations deteriorated well before all of that. And in conversations that I've had with friends who are Chelsea fans and stuff like that, I think the thing that a lot of fans will
Friends
put it
that are
on
Chelsea fans, get rid of them.
is the losses of Chilwell and James to injuries earlier in the year. I think a lot of people outside of Chelsea didn't really see just how important the two of them would be in terms of like just their overall system, with like the value of the two of them on either flanks as wingbacks, because in like replacing them, you have Alonso, you have Azpilicueta, even Hudson-Odoi or Pulisic have played in those wingback roles, and they just don't provide everything that Chilwell and Reece James have shown that they've been willing to do, because it became very, very evident of just how important those two were to how Chelsea function. I mean, I personally had them winning the league at the beginning of the season, was my prediction. I felt like they were already a pretty complete side with one gaping hole. And when you spend 112 million pounds on a player, you anticipate that will be the filling that hole. Obviously, it didn't really come to that. And I think that losing both the fullbacks to injury played a huge role. And then their home form, I think, was greatly hurt, especially the back half of the season. I think that's especially where we saw, you're dropping all these points to Everton, you're dropping all these points to Brentford, at Stamford Bridge. It's when you aren't able to fill up your stadium. Like Arsenal fans were able to easily outsing Chelsea fans at Stamford Bridge at the tail end of the season, because the away section was just as big as the home section. You just don't see that in a regular Premier League match. So I think that definitely had a role, but I think their title aspirations were well out of reach by that point. There was more of a discussion that they maybe could finish fourth than they would finish second at that point in the season. So yeah, I think overall, I think if you put it in like perspective, it's not a terrible season for Chelsea, but I think with the aspirations that they could have had, where you're coming off winning the Champions League, you fill that hole, you're like, okay, I think we can definitely challenge Man City and Liverpool. And I do think that kind of like progression will continue from the likes of Chelsea, Spurs, and Arsenal in particular. I think we'll really start to begin to put pressure on Liverpool and Man City in the next couple of years. I think, I hate to say it, but like Spurs in particular are like in a really, really win now mode, with a lot of their players kind of reaching their prime or the end of their prime. Like, they signed Ivan Perisic this morning, and I don't think he would be a good signing for Arsenal, but I think he's a good signing for Spurs. He's getting up there in age, but I think he fits their system well. He fit Conte's system well at Inter. And if they can get 1 or 2 good years out of him, I think it can be very valuable for them, because Conte's never been around at a job for more than 3 years. That's the timeline that Spurs have. They've got this season, maybe another from him. And like, this is their window to win something. Like they've qualified for the Champions League. They've reached their goal. They need to hang on to their key players. And this is their window is open to win something. And I think that if they'll probably see that and be pushing for something. I hope it blows up in their face, obviously. But I do think they're in a really, really good position to win now, while I think Arsenal in particular is more set up for sustained long-term success with a younger core.
Rich, obviously they're going to be spending a few quid now. They've got new owners. We've got Newcastle. They're going to be spending a few quid. There's quite a lot of activity going to go on in this transfer window. It's going to be hard to keep pace, isn't it? They're going to just go through the ranks, tip out what they don't want, trim the fat, and be cracking away again, aren't they?
I mean, this summer is going to be quite interesting in the market, because I think last year, because of, there was no fans in the stadium, was there the season before, and clubs lost some money. And I think that the transfer market was unusual last summer, whereas this summer now, I can see it being a really mad summer for a lot of clubs. Obviously, Newcastle, as you mentioned, with the money that they're going to be probably splashing out. So I think it's going to be an interesting transfer window, and it's going to be key to who, where the season's going to go next year. And obviously, the clubs, as you mentioned before, you've got those top two. And while certainly Liverpool have got an ageing team and are going to start having to replace the players, aren't they, in the next couple of years? They've still got another year or so at the top left. In the Man City, they'll just replace whoever they need whenever they want because they've got unlimited funds to do that. So we can maybe forget those two for the next year or two. But everybody else in the next 6 or 7, 8 teams down in the league, even probably lower than that, when you look at Newcastle, could potentially, with the right signings in the summer, could potentially be challenging to get in that top 4, because there isn't two more teams that you could say are secure in that top 4. Chelsea, as we saw this season, not as strong as they had been, but again, they're going to spend some money probably with a new owner. So they, but Tottenham scraped in at the end of the season ahead of us. We weren't far away. And other teams just below, Man United, a new manager coming in, they're probably going to spend some money. West Ham have been there or thereabouts the last couple of years. They're building on their European success that they had as well. So it's going to be harder and harder for everybody. And it's going to take a really big summer and a really good summer in the transfer market for maybe 5 or 6 teams if they're going to be looking at getting into that top 4 next season. Because I think next season, I think the title race is going to be, as we said before, a bit like Scotland was a few years ago. It's going to be a 2-horse race again. But below that, I think that race for the top 4 is going to be really interesting next season, because so many teams could potentially be good enough to get that spot. And I do think a lot of that's going to come down to the summer. Who buys who in the summer, what transfers go, which players leave and who's replaced and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting. This is probably going to be one of the most interesting summer transfer windows that we've had for quite a long time. The last few years, the transfer market's been dead to a lot of ways, hasn't it, because of everything that's gone on. But this year, I think it's really going to be interesting. It's going to be exciting. There's going to be a lot of movements. And I think the Premier League in particular is probably I think there's going to be more transfers this summer transfer window in the Premier League than there's probably been for a long, long time, maybe ever, potentially, because there's a lot of money floating around, isn't there, now as well, extra money that's coming in. So it's going to be interesting this summer, certainly, and that's going to pave the way maybe for the expectations on next season for everybody, depending on when the window shuts, who's got who, what players have come in, and then we can maybe look at where everybody's likely to be challenging for. And that'll include us as well in that, unfortunately. I don't think, we're going to have to spend well this summer, and if we don't, I fear where we might be heading next season. I don't think we're going to be, if we don't buy the right players in this summer, we don't spend the right amount of money on the right people, I think next season could be difficult for us with the Europa League as well. But we'll talk about Arsenal obviously a bit later on. But I mean, it's going to be wide open, that top 4 next season. Well, 3rd, 4th is going to be wide open, not the top 2 obviously, but 3rd and 4th place could be any of 7 or 8 teams, or 9 even, potentially have got an opportunity, I think, to challenge for that.
It was a brilliant season, though. I think this is one of my favourite seasons because there was so much going on, and all this last-minute razzmatazz on the last game of the season. For the sort of impartial observer or whatever, they were really engaged right up. People that I know that are not football fans were engaged by this battle. Who's going to drop? Who's going to get that 3rd place? Jay, let's get to you. Let's talk about that mob down the road. Unfortunately, we've got to. How would you sum up their season?
Well, they appointed a world-class manager. He's right up there with Klopp and Pep, right? So sooner or later he was going to get it right. We all enjoyed the whole, the sort of the downward spiral under Nuno, but it took a little while for Conte to get it right. And he's got them playing like an Italian team, like a very deep lying hitters on the break, hitters on the break. Sorry, we'll hit you on the break. We're going to sit deep. And he utilises their main assets, which are Kane and Son. It's up to, the rest of the Premier League to break them down. They hit some real form at the end of the season, which, coupled with some really poor results from our point of view, they got there, and ultimately you deserve the league table. You deserve to finish ultimately where you deserve to finish, and they deserve to get that 4th spot, and we didn't. I mean, Mitch is dead right. They are set up to win now. You've got players in that team that are coming into their, they're in their peak, very much in their peak. And if they don't invest in youth, I think we'll see a very quick decline in their side, or they start to regenerate this team. And Perisic isn't that. You know, he's a good player, don't get me wrong. Very, very strong. And he has been very strong for years. But he is very much the type of player that is only going to come in and play for a year or two. I'm sure, you know, I'm sure Spurs will have a good season next year, because Conte, you know, he hasn't been brought in for, you know, I'm sure Levy promised him a huge transfer kitty when he was appointed, and you know, he's an elite manager, you know, and I think all of us can agree that when Spurs appointed him, it was almost that whole, oh shit, you know, I wish it was anyone else, you know, because he was the pick, and he's also, Conte's also the only really manager that could go into any job in world football, other than Pep and Klopp, and for Spurs to get him, you know, it's a different type of appointment. You know, you can have your Pochettinos, you can have your Mourinhos, but Conte's on a different level. And, you know, I'm a fan of Arteta, but before Arteta was appointed, if we'd have appointed Conte, I'd have been absolutely delighted, you know, and I'm sure, I mean, I hate to say it, I don't even hate to even talk about them, but I hope, I mean, you live in hope that they won't win a trophy, and it, you know, but more than likely he is going to get them over that line in one of the competitions, you know.
So what's realistic for them, Jay? What's their main trophy? Because I can't see them getting involved with the Premier League.
No, I mean, no. I mean, you're looking at the cup competitions, aren't you? You're looking at because, you know, I don't like to say it, but at the back end of last season, they looked like a proper side as well, didn't they? They looked like a unit. They looked defensively good. The midfield was very strong, and obviously their strikers got them over the line as well. So, if a few additions, and I'm sure they'll be strong. You're looking at the cup competitions. You're probably looking at I think we'll all agree nobody's getting anywhere near the top two, but I can't see him doing well in the Champions League, really. But it depends on who they bring in. But you're probably looking at a cup competition. But ultimately, you know, they only just beat us. They only just got over the line, literally a point or whatever it was, you know, and that was, you know, frustrating, don't get me wrong. But realistically, you're probably looking at cup competition. I hope that doesn't happen, but I hope Conte's gone before, you know, that they get anywhere near a trophy, but who knows.
Well, this is what I was going to say to you, Paul. Conte next season, he's got some new players in. It's all looking quite rosy, but he finishes that season empty-handed. Is he going to stay or is he going to walk? Because we know he's got this reputation for bouncing out the door. There was that bit where he turned up for a press conference, kind of questioning whether he was the right fit for the job. I mean, is that sort of mentality? Was that mind games doing that? There's a lot of questions in there. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, I think Conte, given his experience as an elite manager, as Jay referred to before, in both in Italy and in England, he's used to manipulating the media to kind of get his message across, and maybe to send a hidden agenda to Daniel Levy in terms of where he sees the club going. I mean, he had the meltdown, didn't he, after the away defeat at Burnley, when it looked like he was about to leave the club after the press conference, but he played that quite cleverly, and then the season kind of turned around and players responded. I mean, I think Tottenham's problem is going to be really. I think that the depth in their squad, and they're kind of one team that if either Kane or Son gets injured, who steps up to take their place and performs to the same level as those two? And then on the other hand, you kind of look at this season, and to go when they drew 1-1 at Anfield, they should have won that game. They were the best team by far. When they won 3-2 at City, that's one of the best away performances seen by a Premier League team at City in a long, long time. So there's undoubted potential there, and I think as both Jay and Rich did mention there, that Conte's your short-term fix guy. He comes in, brings experienced players, handles the team for 2 or 3 years, wins something or doesn't win something, and then goes. So he's not a long-term answer. But for most clubs, if Conte come to Everton and did that for 3 years, we'd be absolutely delighted. I wouldn't care if he left with the team at 1835 years, who pissed and trophies to show for it. So yeah, I think it's going to be quite fascinating watching Tottenham next season to see how they develop. I think is whether the Premier League teams work out how to play against Conte's system, how to combat it. But, the guy's a serial winner. He knows how to get teams over the line. He has a system, he sticks to it and brings in players to fit that system. So it's going to be fascinating watching, in particular from an Arsenal perspective, the battle between Arsenal and Tottenham to see who's going to be in the top four next season. Because I think, Rich mentioned before about recruitment this summer. I think recruitment is going to be key. I know if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd just be a bit concerned that Tottenham's recruitment appears to start already. That they've identified a target, they've brought some experience international, and straight away you can see the team being strengthened. And I think recruitment is always massively important, but I think this summer in particular, and particularly with the World Cup being on the horizon as well, that the players teams bring in, because I think injuries, etc., are going to play a massive part this season with the World Cup being shoved in, that 6 weeks window in the middle of the season, and having a big squad. Maybe, I hate to say it, but you look at Liverpool, if Mane and Salah aren't fit, we've got Jota and Diaz to come in and take the places. And it's having that strength and depth to make sure you can maintain the challenge throughout the season.
Mitch, they were a bit patchy at times, weren't they, Tottenham? I enjoyed that part in particular. Where do they need to reinforce? I mean, they've got Kane and Son, obviously. There's good players in there, but where's the gaps where he's going to plug?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Like on paper, I think that the wingback positions were a thing that they should look at, and obviously that's why they're bringing in Perisic. I think depth is a big thing. Like if they're very reliant on two particular players in their team. If an injury happens to Kane or Son, it hurts them way more than it hurts in any other position. So, I mean, bringing in quality depth, because like right now, I mean, off the top of my head, if Son gets hurt, who are they bringing in to replace him? Like Lucas Moura is Bergwijn still with them? I don't even know like who their next man up is that like can competently fill like a huge gap in their lineup. And I mean, I could not tell you who plays striker for Tottenham other than Harry Kane, because literally no one has for
Harry
years.
Kane FC.
Like I think Paul mentioned it with the World Cup. I think it's going to be kind of a brutal time when it comes to match scheduling. It's going to be close together. It's going to be congested. Injuries could be a really big problem. As well as match fitness. And I think that is probably the biggest problem with Spurs squad as of right now, because I think they have a pretty solid starting 11 for the roles that they need filled. Like, I mean, I'm personally not a huge fan of some of their players. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Eric Dyer. I don't think he's that good. I'm not a huge fan of Hugo Lloris, but I think they fit the roles that they need really effectively. And like, even players like Matt Doherty have stepped up for him this season, and Kulusevski and Boubacar have been solid signings for January, really good reinforcements for them. I think they've got a really solid team and they're really well coached, but I think depth is the issue that will stop them from getting anywhere close to a title battle. Like Jay was saying, I think that their best chance of winning a trophy is the League Cup or FA Cup. Conte's traditionally struggled in Europe. I don't see the Spurs team particularly being anything to fear in the Champions League. I don't think that if I'm on other team in the Champions League, I'm not exactly scared of what Spurs can do. I think that the League Cup or FA Cup is probably the best bet for them in terms of like finally getting over that trophy drought. I think depth is the biggest thing that's going to like stop them getting there. Because again, it's similar to how Arsenal kind of fell apart last season when we lost Thomas Partey and we lost Kieran Tierney and we lost like these key players, and didn't have like the proper depth to really fill just like how big of a role that they actually played. I feel like every single team other than Liverpool and City deal with these issues, because we saw the same thing. I was talking about the same thing with Chelsea, with Chilwell and James. Like if you lose these players that are like very, very valued in your system, everything can implode. or someone doesn't live up to the expectations they're supposed to have, like we saw with Manchester United last season, where on paper they were a really good team, but then in practice it just did not work. That's how we see results differ at the end of the season than the predictions we made at the beginning. Because going into last season, in my head, solid top four was locked down of City, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Man United. Obviously, it did not shake out that way because obviously the game's not played on paper, and on the on-paper lineup that United had did not translate into a full season of success.
Let's talk about Man United. They've it's a mess down there, isn't it? Solskjaer, Rangnick, and now Ten Hag. What's your thoughts on that unholy mess? I mean, it's quite enjoyable, isn't it? But the Premier League needs Man United, I think. You need strong clubs. What's your thoughts on the background of that unholy mess, Richard?
I mean, I suppose, after all those years that we had battling against Man United, it's not too disappointing to see them in such a mess. But I'm not sure if it's as much of a mess as we like to think it might be, in the sense that, as has been mentioned already, they do have very good players at the football club. And now they've got in a manager who should be able to get more from that group of players, plus new players that he's going to bring in. So while they had a really, really strange season, I mean, having finished runners-up the season before, in the end, they finished sixth, which wasn't a disaster, but for Manchester United and the players that they had, everyone, as said, really expected them to be in the top four again. And it was a strange season for them. I felt as though maybe what they did by getting Rangnick in for a temporary job till the end of the season actually cost them an opportunity to get in the top four. I think if they'd either kept Ollie or got a permanent manager at the time, I think they would still have probably got top four, because the players would have been more motivated, and I just think a long-term manager would have got more out of them. And I think that was the key why Manchester United didn't get top four in the end, because that was a strange decision for me. You don't bring in a temporary manager at the end of the season. You either keep the one you've got or you get a permanent replacement. You don't do that. That's just crazy. So I think that's cost them ultimately. But I think next season now, with the new manager coming in, if they keep some of the really good players that they've got, I can see them being much stronger next season. I can see them being much more consistent in their performances. And I think they're going to be a real threat to the top four, get back into the top four next season. I'd be amazed if they're not there or thereabouts, getting back in there. So, they caused a lot of their own problems this season, maybe, with some of the stuff going on behind the scenes. And, they should, as it would say, the squad they've got, they should have been in the top four. There's no doubt about that. They are one of the strongest squads in the Premier League. And now I say they've sorted the issue out with the management situation. I can see them going from strength to strength, and I think they're going to be my fear next season from an Arsenal perspective is I think that Tottenham, with the right recruitment, we've already mentioned how great that manager they've got, and with Manchester United now, I think that could be the top four sorted out for next season, or certainly be challenging for those places. And we're going to have to do a lot of work to keep pace with both of those two clubs, not to mention the other clubs as well. I mean, Chelsea I've already mentioned, so I think it's going to have a negative effect on us, but certainly from Manchester United perspective, I think they could be set for a much better season next year, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. And that's a worry from our point of view, definitely.
Jay, there's been all sorts going on behind the scenes, isn't there? There's been that Harry Maguire sort of death threat thing, the Greenwood situation. There seems to have been a lack of discipline and a lack of spirit, some sort of disharmony going on in the dressing room. And then you've got this thing with Ronaldo. Let's talk about Ronaldo. 37, still one of the best players around, and he scores goals wherever he goes. Yet some people are saying that when this new manager comes in, takes over, he's not going to fit. Would you keep him?
Oh, you have to keep somebody like Ronaldo. You have to get him on board, and you have to work with him, almost make him part of your coaching team. Because somebody with not just experience, like he still can do it. He can do it on the park, and he's scoring goals. And yeah, if Ten Hag, I mean, I'm sure Ten Hag's an intelligent bloke. And I agree with Rich. I expect United to be much higher next season. I think the appointment of Ten Hag is similar to the appointment of Arteta, in the sense that United have realised that they need a reset. They need somebody to come in and
it's here, the process.
When it comes, but like I say, I'll just reiterate, when it comes to somebody like Ronaldo, I'm sure Ten Hag will have already spoken to him and said, you can stay at the club for as long as you want to. You're a legend, and the fact that he can just still do it, and the influence that somebody like Ronaldo can have on some of those younger players that we started to see at the end of last season. The influence not just on the training ground, but how to conduct yourself and how to, the right kind of lifestyle. Because you look at the bloke, he's an absolute specimen. And he's a testament to. He's a testament to to himself. His training regime, his diet, and the way he's lived his life. You'd be an absolute fool if you were a young player in that Man United squad. You'd be taking a notepad to training. You'd have a notepad in your back pocket, wouldn't you? And you'd be noting down every aspect of this guy's footballing career or footballing experience when he's with you. And you have to keep him. He's to still do it. He's what, a couple of years younger than I am, and he's still doing it and smashing it.
Well, you look in good shape, Jay. You give him a run for his money, mate.
I wish I was good. But he's still scoring 25, 30 yarders. He's still scoring headers. It's not like he's just turned into a sort of a target man. He can still do it. And if Ten Hag's got anything about him, you would have him there right next to you. You'd make him captain, wouldn't you? And you'd be the club captain. He'd be the go-to man that the rest of the squad look up to. What a guy to have around. He was a great signing last year, and I know it didn't quite work out for the team, but he absolutely smashed it, didn't he?
The other thing as well is he might be a yard and a half slower or whatever, but I haven't seen it myself. But it's this, isn't it? He's in the right place. It's the technique. I mean, he brought a ball down. I can't remember. It might have even been against us, and he just sliced it into the net. The timing was impeccable, like he was a 20-year-old boy again. Paul, let's come to you. In that United team on paper, who would you keep and who would you clear out? We've discussed Ronaldo, so he's a keeper. I think we all agree with that. Who are you going to get rid of? Just have a little. Who's letting them down? Who's letting the side down? Let's do an assassination thing. Come on.
I think there's two elements to United at the moment. I think on the one hand, you got the younger players who haven't progressed this season. So, for example, Marcus Rashford had an awful season, and whether he deserves a place there or not next year, I'm not quite sure. You had the Mason Greenwood thing as well, which is all kind of blown up off the pitch. So there's two of your bright young forwards who I'm sure United were expecting a lot from this season, who straight away have not been able to reach the levels that they reached in the previous season. You got Wan Bissaka, a full-back, who seems to have gone backwards since he's been at United, and he's one of the most promising full-backs England's produced for a while. So you've got that issue of younger players not developing. You also got the issue of strange signings. I mean, why they bought Varane, I have no idea, because I don't quite understand what he's brought to that defence at all. In terms of who I get rid of, well, I really struggle to see how Harry Maguire justifies his place in that team. To me, he's never been a top-class defender, and I think he's probably playing at a level above his skill sets at the moment, playing for Man United. You've got obviously Pogba's got to go because I just don't think he means anything to the team. I mean, compare Pogba's attitude to Ronaldo's attitude. It's like years apart. You'd want a team with people with Ronaldo's attitude. You would not want a team with people with Pogba's attitude. And then you've got people like Edison Cavani. Okay, you might get one more season out of him as a sub, but is he really the one you want to lead the line? Bruno Fernandes, I thought, had a really underwhelming season last year, and I just don't think him and Ronaldo, for whatever reason, have kind of gelled together in the way that they should have done. I think, as Jay has outlined there, and Rich mentioned before, I think it's a definite case that you have to give Ronaldo, more responsibility within that team because the man's a goal machine, isn't he? And if you're playing that side, you want someone who's structured around the pitch, who exudes confidence, who you can get the ball to, you can hold up, create chances. If you desperately seeking an equaliser in the last minute, you get a corner. Ronaldo's going to be there to try and finish off with his head. So I think it's going to be intriguing watching what happens at United this season, because I think Ten Hag could come in and clear out 8-9 plays and no one would question that. But it's really hard to build the team from scratch. So you're going to have to identify a core to build the team around and fill the slots around that. Now, whether with him being a Dutch manager here, he goes back to Ajax and brings some young, promising players to add to the team, I don't know. I think the other issue for United is that although there's still the aura of Man United, the name still means something. But if you're a young up-and-coming player and you want to play in the Champions League and United aren't in the Champions League, then you're kind of thinking, well, would I really want to move there when the club appears to be declining? They haven't got Champions League football. They just appointed a new manager. I have no idea how that's going to work out. So I think, it's almost, to me, it's a crossroads season for United, this. If they don't get themselves back to kind of the top 4 level this season, then you kind of wonder what their next move is. And they've gone for the experienced manager with Van Gaal, didn't quite work out, and Mourinho. They've gone for the apprentice with David Moyes, appointed by Ferguson. That didn't quite work out. Now they've gone for the young continental manager. So they've almost covered every managerial stereotype that they could bring in. And the more you look back at United's season, why on earth they didn't go for Conte when they got to Solskjaer, I have absolutely no idea, because I think he would have done a fabulous job at United. And I think that was a real miscalculation. And when you read all this stuff, when you listen to Gary Neville say he doesn't play the type of football United demand, sorry, guy, all fans demand is a winning team. They're not actually that bothered about the style of football. give us 3 points every week, do the double over Liverpool, and then you're made for life there. So I think that was an opportunity missed. And I agree with what Rich said before. I think the plan of Solskjaer, I think he should have been given more time. And what big club these days appointed interim manager to be in charge for 2 terms? To me, it made no sense whatsoever. And if you think to join a club that's got a growing reputation for forward planning, United's way down your list there.
That's the one that gets me. We've discussed it. The interim manager, I think they should just throw the idea in the bin. It's a waste of time, isn't it? Right, Mitch, let's crack on. We'll look at City, but firstly Liverpool. Despite not winning the Premiership, they've had a cracker of a season, even though they failed in the Champions League final.
But real quick, I want to talk about Man United real quick, because I disagree with a lot of things, because I for one, I think Ten Hag's a good appointment, but I think the biggest thing is they need to give him time, because this squad is not ready to jump back into the top 4 now with a couple signings. I would get rid of Ronaldo. 100% actually, like, not a doubt in my mind. I think he is really, really good at scoring goals. And I think outside of that, I don't think he contributes very much to the team. I think that particularly under Ragnick, but I think the same applies with Ten Hag, where Ragnick's style does not really fit Ronaldo, whereas like wanting your forwards to be pressing, you're not getting that out of a 38-year-old. And then with Ten Hag, you want more of a possession style of play. You're not getting that out of a player who's playing on the shoulder of the last man the entire game, just trying to.
Can you afford to lose him though, Mitch, as you're rebuilding? Because
absolutely,
it's worth
I
goals,
think 100% a player you can
if he wasn't there.
No, I think that Man United would have been worse this season without him because of his goals. But I think longer term, if you want to build a core of a team, which is what you do, if you're bringing in a young manager to a young or not, I guess he's not young, but like a less of an.
He's 52, isn't he, Mitch?
Yeah, he's like older than Pep.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like
yeah,
I
yeah.
think of him as young because like this is like his first big move from Ajax.
Mm-hmm.
You're starting this kind of like what looks like should be a longer term project. I think you want a bigger reset button than hanging around on the player that's on the highest wages of your team. And yeah, he scored the most goals, but like he's not adding the most outside of that. And I think for the same reason that Arsenal wanted to move on from Aubameyang is you want someone to do more than just hang on the last man of the defender as like a modern day number 9. It was obviously easier for Arsenal to move on from Abba because he just like wasn't scoring goals. And then he also wasn't contributing in other aspects. But I think it's a potentially risky decision, but I think it's one that can pay off long term, especially for a manager like Ten Hag to, especially if you want to adjust the culture in any way. Someone like Ronaldo very easily could derail a project like Ten Hag's. By being like, well, you've only coached in the Eredivisie. Like, I don't care about you. Like the ego of Ronaldo could very easily overtake everything that Ten Hag can try to do at Manchester United and can just immediately throw their project off the rails. And I think that it's too big of I think it's a bigger risk to keep him than it is a bigger risk to sell him, honestly.
Bit of controversy. We love it.
Yeah, so that's my take on United, and I think they'll lose a lot of players for free agency, like with Pogba and Lingard, and I think Cavani are out of contract. I actually would keep Harry Maguire. I think that we see him.
God, you're full of surprises tonight.
We see him perform with England, so like there's clearly a player there. He performed with Leicester. I don't know if he was worth the price that Man United paid for him. I don't know if he'll ever prove to be that caliber of center back, but I think that one of the biggest, like for the last 5 years, Manchester United have needed a defensive midfielder. They've needed like a rock in midfield, like a proper 6. They've refused to fill that hole, and I think it's affected their just overall play. It's affected the look of their back line because they're getting exposed. Like Harry Maguire is forced to step out and try to cut things out because where he's not as comfortable because the midfield is so weak defensively, which is really funny to me because I feel like they keep being linked with Frankie de Jong, which on paper makes sense because he played with Ten Hag at Ajax. Yeah, sure, but Frankie de Jong, great player. Is he at all the profile of midfielder that Manchester United need? No, he's not. They need a 6. They've always needed a 6, and they're refusing to buy a 6. I think he would be the epitome of a Manchester United signing because they're buying the pedigree over the actual fit, which is the entire issue with their squad building to begin with. That's why, if they had bought, I honestly think if they had bought Ruben Neves at the end of the window last year instead of Ronaldo, they would have had a way more successful season because they would have filled a gap and allowed for other players to flourish in other roles because Ronaldo hurt their best player, hurt Fernandes. It made Pogba have a role where they didn't really have a spot for him. They had to push. Well, I don't really want to talk about Greenwood because it's, kind of a piece of shit. Made him push out wide. It affected Rashford. It affected their entire ecosystem, and it made everyone else worse. Ronaldo had a good individual season, but I think he made Man United worse in terms of overall players, and also the fact that they went for him instead of filling their actual need, which is again has been a 6 for the last 5 years. So that's my 2 cents on Man United. And then when it comes to Liverpool, I think, I think with the expectation... Be
careful, don't go and upsetting Paul, will you? Remember, he's got his toffee shirt on as well.
Yeah. I think the expectations that Liverpool set for themselves throughout the season is this might be the greatest team ever. We might be able to win a quadruple, whatever, and then ended up missing out on
the press, though, isn't it?
The two biggest parts of the quadruple. So they had a parade to celebrate the FA Cup and a Carabao Cup, and on its own, I think that those like winning both of those cup competitions are like a really, really great achievement. But having fallen short on the other two that are like way bigger awards, kind of would leave a sour taste in a lot of Liverpool fans' mouths, just being so close. I mean, but even then, like they scored 0 goals in cup finals this season. So like very, very like weird path to a lot of their victories. I think they're like a fantastic team, but they're also now gearing up for a refresh. Klopp renewing is really, really important, I think, to that. But I think they sell. Mane looks for sure going to be leaving this window, and I think Firmino might be out the door too, which means that 2 of their like 3 core players up front are going to be gone, leaving Salah and Diaz and Jota, who are really, really talented. They're Ryan Carvalho from Fulham, who's really, really good. I think that they've shown an ability to refresh the lineup really effectively. I think the midfield is something that people aren't focusing enough on for them, of how it's going to be longer term. I think both like defensively, they've got a really good, like, you know, good fullback core with 2 really, really talented players in Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. They've got Van Dijk, who's arguably still one of the best center backs in the world. They've got Konate, they've got Matip, they've got Joe Gomez, they've got a really good core in the back line. They've got Allison. I think the midfield though is aging quickly. Thiago had a great season. He's a quality player. I think you'll get 1 or 2 more seasons out of him. Fabinho's getting up there. They're reportedly in for God, I sound so American when I try to pronounce his name because I cannot do it. But Tchouaméni, or the midfielder from Monaco, who's a really, really talented player, and I think would be.
I'm not even going to try and do that.
Yeah, no, I can't do it. And I think he'd be a really good fit as like a replacement for Fabinho because he's an unbelievably talented defensive midfielder. But I think we're starting to see these players like, you know, Jordan Henderson's still starting for them. I don't know if he's necessarily at the quality that you need as a Liverpool midfielder. If you're going to be on paper challenging for a quadruple, I think you need to have a stronger starter than Jordan Henderson, despite what he brings like as a leader and like to the team. I mean, James Milner still gets minutes for them. That's unreal to me. Like I was watching before the Champions League final, they were playing the replay of the 2018 final, and like they rolled up to a final with like Dejan Lovren starting. James Milner was in their starting 11, and it's like, oh man, this Liverpool team has improved so much. But I think we're now getting to the end of the cycle of a lot of their key players, and how they replace them. Like they're on the right track. Like what you've done with Diaz and Jota, perfect replacements for Mane and Firmino. But like how you replace Fabinho, how you replace Henderson, how you eventually down the road replace Salah, if that's later rather than sooner, is going to be really key to this team's longevity. But I think having the stability of Jurgen Klopp is going to help them remain a still very, very relevant team for the next couple of years at the very least, and still challenging for titles and Champions Leagues and cups. So yeah, I mean, in a vortex, I think it's a successful season, but like when you see a team competing for quadruples and then not get the Premier League and Champions League, I think it can be a little disappointing to see if you were a Liverpool fan.
Rich, moving on to City, disappointed that they just got the Premier League. And is Erling Haaland the final piece of the puzzle to make them Champions League winners?
I mean, just quickly on Liverpool, this current Liverpool team actually reminds me so much of the peak Arsene Wenger Arsenal. You know, should be winning every single trophy, but ends up winning not as much as they should do. And very, very similar, you know, they sort of, in a more modern way, but they play a very similar way of playing football as well. You know, sort of Salah's got the Henry kind of role, hasn't he, scoring those goals from a wider position as opposed to a centre forward. And they just got so many similarities to me. And the way they finished this season reminded me quite a lot of our Invincible season when we got knocked out of the Champions League when we should have won it. You know, we got knocked out of the FA Cup in the semi-final because we rested players and we should have won that as well. And, you know, the League Cup semi-final against Middlesbrough, we played a younger team and got knocked out of that. We could have won the quadruple that season. We could have done. We should have done, really, maybe. And just very similar in the terms of, I think, at the end of it all, when maybe Klopp's gone or when this team's broke up, I think Liverpool fans, or maybe football in general, will look back and think that Liverpool team didn't win anywhere near as many trophies as they should have done, which is exactly how I think most people feel about that Arsene Wenger team. Should have won a lot more than we won a lot of trophies, but we should have won more because of the quality that we had and the team that we had. And it just reminds that this Liverpool team does remind me of that, actually. And I'm hoping that they don't go on and win even more, because that makes it more difficult for us. But they seem to be a little bit more like the bridesmaid as opposed to the bride quite too often, which I say a bit similar to that Arsenal team. But I suppose when you look at City, it's a complete opposite, isn't it? And yes, the way that they're funded has a massive say in that, doesn't it? You know, whatever Pep needs, Pep gets. And he's had that throughout his managerial career. And as great a coach as he clearly is, and a greater manager as he clearly is, it would be very interesting to see how he would get on if he didn't have the funds available that he's constantly had throughout his career. I'll be really interested to see what he could do with, you know, less than top quality players. How good a coach is he? Can he get more out of these players? We never know, because he's never going to take on a job like that, is he? But obviously, as things stand at the moment, they've got a fantastic squad. They've got no doubt they're going to, you know, improve that as well with the money that they've got. It's inevitable that they will. And whereas with Liverpool, you can see this Liverpool team coming to the end, you know, a lot of aging players, as we mentioned. They're going to have to find a replacement, which is going to be hard. We found the same when, you know, Henry left and all that kind of stuff, Bergkamp and everybody. So whereas this Man City team, you can't see where this is going to end, because whatever they need, they just get. They'll buy younger players, they've got experienced players. And yeah, you could say, what will they do when De Bruyne maybe finishes or this, that and the other? But, you know, Company finished, they just replaced him with someone else. And, you know, Bernardo Silva, all these players, you know what I mean? And it won't make any difference. And that's what is, for me, it's not good for football in general, because this period of most teams will only dominate for 3 or 4 years, and then they'll have to rebuild and start again, and it takes them a year or 2 or 3 to come back. Man United went through that a little bit, didn't they, as well, and they got back on track again. Where you can't see how this City's going to end. You know, the only hope we've got, maybe, which not hope from me, but from a football perspective, is maybe if Newcastle can do the same, Newcastle may be the only team that can eventually be able to challenge them financially. Because, and to me, that's a worry, isn't it? It's not good for football. And until maybe the things have changed, that maybe there's caps put on what teams can spend. I know there's supposed to be financial fair play, but that don't seem to have made any difference. So what worries me from a football perspective going forward is this City dominance doesn't look as though it's going to show any signs of ending. And yes, they might have the odd season here and there. You know, the other year they didn't win the Premier League, and they still haven't won the Champions League yet. But I can't, from certainly in the Premier League and domestically, I think that they can dominate for the next 10, 15 years. I can't see how it's going to end. I really can't. And I don't like to think like that, because football to me has always been about competition. And, you know, it's nice to have different teams challenging and different teams being able to win things. I think Liverpool are going to drop away and they might have to rebuild, and it might take them a few years. And then someone else is going to be challenging City, but that's what it's going to be. It's going to be City and somebody else if it's not Liverpool. And, you know, yes, it's difficult to really assess Man City's season, or even the last 10 years of Man City, 15 years of Man City, because literally all it's been is they've just literally they've had everything funded for them. They haven't had to do anything really. It's been so easy for them. And, you know, and I say again, I'm not trying to say that Pep isn't a great manager. His record speaks for itself. But ultimately, pretty much any manager with half a knowledge of football would find it difficult not to succeed at Man City, you know, simply because of the fact that whatever they want, they can basically get, can't they? And I don't know, I don't think it's good for football. And I don't like the way that that's gone, really. You know, other teams have dominated periods of football in England before. Liverpool did, Man United did, we sort of did a little bit, but not in this way. And, you know, even Chelsea, when they had all that money, they didn't win the league 4 or 5 times out of 6, did they? They went a couple of times in a row, then they had to change again. But Man City just keep going and keep going. And while Pep's there in particular, and while they've got the funding that they've got, I think this is just going to go on. It's going to go on. I think in 10 years' time, we'll be sitting here saying, oh, well, who's going to be challenging City this season? It'll be exactly the same again. And I can't see it. Honestly, I can't see it. And that kind of worries. It kind of saddens me a little bit, actually, because, I don't know, maybe because I'm a bit more old school and a bit more of a romantic when it comes to football, Yeah, obviously Nottingham Forest have just come up. I quite like, I remember Nottingham Forest winning European Cups and winning the league and stuff like that. You're never going to see that again, ever. I know Leicester did it the other year, one off, but, those sort of things are what sport's about and what football's about, isn't it? The opportunity. And while City are doing what they're doing, it's kind of killed that, hasn't it, really? And I don't know. I find it difficult to get my head around the way that that's happened, really. Because Man City, it's not like they've got a rich history in football in the way that Liverpool have, or Man United have, or we have, or even Everton, And Newcastle have got a big history in football, really, not in the last 50 years, but previously, from early days. Man City have never really had any history there. And I don't know, it's almost like, and maybe people say I'm jealous, maybe, but I don't feel that they deserve that success that they're having. They don't deserve it as a club because they haven't earned that from previously, from being a club that's, people throughout the world 15 years ago, no one had heard of Man City, no one, let alone care about them. Whereas no matter where you've been in the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years, everybody all over the world knows Liverpool, Man United, Arsenal, these other clubs. They just, no one had heard of Chelsea probably either, to be fair, similar kind of thing, but City have taken it to another level, haven't they? And yes, Newcastle may well go down the same route. In the next 3 or 4 years, it could well be the same. And that, for me, isn't good for football in general. It's not. It's good for those clubs, obviously. They're winning a lot of trophies. They're experiencing all those things. But I don't think it's good for football. And I think unless the Premier League decide to, realise that money isn't the most important thing when it comes to sport, then it's not going to change. I think not just the Premier League, I suppose it's everywhere in the world, isn't it? Really, in football, it's the same. And I don't know, something seriously needs to change because it's almost going to get to the point where we won't be talking about who's going to win the league at the start of the season. We'll be talking about who's coming third and fourth. Because that's it. Because even second, but everyone's fighting for second place. That's not good for football, is it? That's not good for the league. Other countries have been through similar. Scotland, we mentioned. Spain's been like that to a certain degree. Real Madrid won the league, although Barcelona. So I don't know. Something needs to change, and I don't think it's ever going to. And it kind of worries me where football's heading. And Man City are the epitome of that for me. The epitome of everything that's wrong with modern football is summed up in that one club. They can't even fill their ground. They haven't even got the fan base to back it up. And it's like, it's not right that they can spend all that money when they can't even fill their ground. It's ridiculous. And there's other clubs who sell out every week, and deserve to have success and never going to get it. And that, to me, that's not right and that's not fair. And I don't know. I've got a big problem with Man City anyway from years ago, I suppose. But
we'd never have known.
But ultimately, though, I do believe that it isn't good for football. And and I think maybe the media and was it they mentioned the other day to Pep, didn't they, about how everybody supports Liverpool, right? And I think people don't necessarily support Liverpool, but we would rather Liverpool win stuff than Man City because at least Liverpool have sort of done it in a better way. I'm not saying that they're not funded as well, obviously they are, but at least they've done it in a better way, for me, a way that I can relate to. And if Arsenal are going to be successful in the future, I would rather we did it the Liverpool way rather than the Man City way or the Chelsea way or the Newcastle way. I wouldn't want Arsenal to do that. I'd rather we won nothing ever again than become Man City, personally, for me, because I don't like that. It's not good for football, and I don't want us to follow that route. We might have to if we're ever going to win anything big again. Possibly we might do, otherwise we're not going to be able to do it. But I would maybe rather we didn't, if I'm honest, because
I suppose that's why the romance of the FA Cup still exists, because that's the one competition where anyone could win it.
Exactly, and you say that, but Man City won them all the other year, didn't they? They won a lot, they won all the trophies, and it's going to get to a point where that's going to happen every single year. The fact that Man City could win the League Cup, was it 4 or 5 years in a row? Because even when they rested players, when they're for the other competitions, they still got their second 11 would still finish in the top 2 or 3 in the Premier League. Because they just stockpile the best. They don't buy players they need. They just buy players to stop other people paying them. They bought Jack Grealish, 100 million. They didn't need him. He hasn't improved their team. He hasn't improved their squad. It's just that stopped someone else buying him. Haaland, you mentioned him, right? They bought Haaland, right? What's the point of anybody else playing football next season in the Premier League? Absolute waste of time. They've got the best striker in the world at this moment in time. He is, there's no doubt. He's got everything for the Premier League. He's got the physicality, he's got the speed, he scores goals. And the one thing that Man City don't have is a goal-scoring centre forward. They never have had, because they don't really play that way. But with Haaland now, they wanted Harry Kane last year. They've got Haaland now. I'll be amazed if next season it's not going to go to the last day with 1 point. They'll win that league by 10, 15 points next season, because Liverpool aren't going to be as strong, especially if Mane goes and one or two others might leave. A bit of uncertainty there. They're a bit older, Liverpool. I think Man City will have that league wrapped up. It's almost like the title's over already for me now. They bought Haaland, that's it. The league's over. It's just everyone else is fighting for all the other places.
The scraps.
Yeah, exactly. It is the scraps. And unfortunately, this is where we are with football at the moment in this country with what's happening. And, it is sad, really, when you think about it, isn't it? It's sad for football. And it's sad that we're losing that competitiveness, really, at the top end of the league, because I don't know. I just think that's it now. As soon as I heard that was it, well, obviously we kind of knew Haaland was going there, but as soon as you know it's definitely happening, you think, well, that's it. Everybody else might as well forget the Premier League next season and just try and win a cup, because that's all there is left. No one else can win the Premier League, so let's just try and win a cup. That's it. Don't rest players for their cup games like you normally do. Rest them for the Premier League games and play your strongest team in the cups, because that's the only thing you've got to win, the only thing you've got a chance of winning now. And that's everybody else. That's not just us. That's every other team. That's all the other 19 teams in the Premier League. Just rest your players in the Premier League. When you play Man City, put out a youth team against Man City. Let Man City beat you 12-0. It doesn't matter. They're going to win the league anyway. Put your efforts into trying to win a cup. That's what I want Arsenal to do next season. The Europa League, ideally, but a cup. Because we're not going to win the Premier League. Absolutely no. We've got no chance. Just, no one is. No one is. So to me, that's what I'd want to see that happen. And maybe if teams start doing that, then the Premier League might look at it and think this is spoiling the spectacle of the Premier League, because teams are resting players in the Premier League. And they need to maybe do, they might look at it. I don't know. But yeah, it's over. The league's over. Just give Man City next season's title now. When they had their little bus parade, just give it to them now. Have next season's as well, and the season after, probably, because no one else is going to take it off them.
Jay, let me ask you this. Jurgen Klopp's been named manager of the season, and Jamie O'Hara, and I think it was Paul Merson actually said that how can that happen, because he didn't get a sniff of the Premier League title. Do you think it's a good decision or a bad decision? I mean, Klopp has been very successful this season, although he's failed at 2 final hurdles. He's had a bumper season, hasn't he?
Yeah. Just before that, I just wanted to just add a little bit about Haaland. I agree completely with Rich. Like, ridiculous signing. It's like it won't surprise me, if at the end of next season Haaland's probably only played about 25 games, and he's only used in certain situations. And the scary thing for me is about Man City, you can go and sign the most. I mean, the guy is it's like he's been grown in a lab. He doesn't even look human. Even the way he runs, he's like a robot or whatever. And it wouldn't surprise me if he only came in certain games. And in any other team in the world, the lad will play every minute of every game. And for City, I think Pep, with what we know and how he often plays with no striker, I think we'll only see Haaland in certain games, certain situations, probably quite often in the Champions League, but more so when it comes to the Premier League or cup games or whatever, you probably won't even see him. He'd be on the bench. And that's the scary thing for me. City, I very rarely enjoy watching them. I loved when they got beat by Real Madrid. Loved it, and I love seeing Pep's reaction after the game, because it's almost as if, he's such a bad loser, as you would expect from a top level manager. But I very rarely even tune in for City games, because it's going to be 3 or 4-0, probably more. And it's not something, don't get me wrong, like these players, you took, De Bruyne's, you Cancelo's, these are top players. I'm not saying they're not, but for a team, watching the team, I very rarely enjoy watching him. I will watch him when Haaland's playing, because I think he's just ridiculous, But yeah, I just wanted to add that. I just wanted to say it wouldn't surprise me if at the end of next season, Haaland's probably only made about 25 starts. About the manager of the season, one of my good friends is a Liverpool fan, and I had this conversation with him. I find it a bit strange that Klopp was given that Manager of the Year. Don't get me wrong; they've had a they've had a brilliant season. There's no two ways about it. They very nearly did the unthinkable. They very nearly won all 4 trophies. In the conversation I had with my mate who's a Liverpool fan, what's the bigger achievement, going a season unbeaten or winning 4 trophies? And I think I couldn't, I love the Invincibles and I love that achievement. Winning 4 trophies, that's a completely different level of achievement here. You've set out and you've won everything. And it proved too much for Liverpool, but they came really close. I had no problem with the trophy parade because for me, you win a trophy, you celebrate it. Doesn't matter what it is. You set out, you got 4 trophies or 3, whatever. If you win one, you celebrate it with your fans. And Liverpool, they're not pumped through, with oil money. Like Rich said, they were, you got to celebrate that. You got to celebrate these clubs that win trophies that aren't pumped through sort of oil money. That's got to be celebrated. For me, Pep and Klopp, when it comes to Manager of the Year, I always like to think maybe give it to someone else. Give it to someone like a Potter, or give it to I can't remember his name now. The Brentford manager, or
Frank. Thomas Frank. Yeah, I'd agree.
These guys, it's a completely different level of job, isn't it? It's a different level. You can't go and sign Haaland. You can't go and sign Grealish. You can't go and sign, Luis Diaz. Diaz, again, what a player. He's coming at Liverpool and he's instantly adapted to the league. But when you can go and pull someone like that in the January transfer window and slot him into your side straight away, that, you're not, these players, Potter at Brighton, he signs like Mwepu and before that Basuma and these players, hidden gems, and he gets them all playing to a really high tune. And we all enjoyed Brighton beating Man United at the end of the season. Was it 4-0 or 3-0 at half time or whatever it was when Brighton beat Man United? And I'd just like to see, forget Pep and Klopp. They've got all the, they've got the Premier League medals, they've got your FA Cup winners medals. Give the Manager of the Year to someone else. Give it to someone like my personal pick would be Graham Potter, because I think he's done a brilliant job at a club that nobody ever expects anything from, do they? So that would be my. It was a strange decision to give it to Klopp because it's the Premier League Manager of the Year. They didn't win the Premier League, but for me, give it to someone else.
While we're on it, then we'll just have a quick circle round of who you would pick as Manager of the Year. You've gone Graham Potter. Paul, who would you have gone for?
Well, I think in terms of the expectation before the start of the season and what they've actually achieved, I think Thomas Frank's done an absolutely superb job at Brentford. I think there's no expectation at all that they can stay up. His recruitment's been excellent. He's got them playing a certain way. I agree totally with what Jay said about watching Man City. I'd rather watch Brentford than Man City because I find their football far more invigorating to watch as a supporter. I know not everyone might agree with that, but that's just my personal view. So definitely, Thomas Frank is definitely up there and should be considered. And if he'd been appointed in September, you would have to consider Eddie House. I think he did a fantastic job in the second half of the season in Newcastle as well. So there can be the two I'd have in the frame those. And, I suppose there might be a few people out there that might say, hang on, how come Conte's not getting a shout here?
Yeah, because he's not. Mitch, who would you have, Mitch? It's an Arsenal podcast. We're not having that fraud on here, promoting that lot.
I think if you're going off of just like pure success, it's got to be Pep. But I think I definitely Thomas Frank I'm up there with too, because I'm just a huge fan of how Brighton run things, and not Brighton, Brentford, and to finish like well out of a relegation battle first season out of the championship is really impressive, especially when you're the team that is coming out of the playoff and not an automatic promotion team. I think the automatic promotion team, the team that wins the championship is often the ones it's like, oh, maybe they have a chance to survive. Maybe they have the chance to beat the Sheffield United or the Leeds of this season. And I guess we can now throw Brentford into that list of teams that have performed really well their first season up. And I think that Brentford has a really good blueprint in order to sustain long-term success. And so I would definitely strongly consider Thomas Frank for that, because, I mean, to take any team that comes from the championship and then not even have to like worry about a relegation battle is really, really impressive.
I've got two names on my list for manager of the year. One was Graham Potter, who I think has done an amazing job. And the other one was David Moyes, who I just think he's just cracked it, isn't he, down there at West Ham? They got rid of him once. He comes back. He's better than ever. And whoever he brings in seems to work. And, yeah, for me, I'd probably just say David Moyes would edge it. Rich, who's your pick?
I mean,
Let's say Conte, or we'll come round your house.
I had David Moyes on my list as a potential, just because, you know, followed up last season in it, getting to Europa League, got to the semi-final again. You know, they qualified for Europe again. I've got to be honest, Graham Potter for me, I think, is the best coach in the Premier League, and I think that and I said this about a year and a half ago. I said he will be the next or the first English manager to win the Premier League. Not with Brighton, obviously. I think he'll get a bigger job at Liverpool or a Man City job later on in his career, or hopefully Arsenal one day. But I can see him, he's that good a coach. There's absolutely no question about that. Or he'll be the England manager. Possibly one of those two things is going to happen for Graham Potter. I can't speak highly enough of him. I think he's absolutely fantastic. You know, to get what he's got out of that Brighton team every season, and this season in particular, I mean, they've had their best ever season in the Premier League, the most ever points, the most ever wins, everything. You know, they're brilliant defensively. And if they had a goal scorer, they would challenge for Europe. There's absolutely no question in my mind. The other one I wanted to mention, actually, and maybe an Arsenal connection, Patrick Vieira. I think he's done an amazing job at Crystal Palace. Absolutely amazing job. You know, you think when the season started, they had no players left because they pretty much had to start from scratch. And he's gone in there. And yes, you know, if you look at the results over the season compared to last season, it's not massively different. Defensively, they've been a lot better, and they've picked up a few more points. They finished higher in the league, but the job he's done there, again, a bit similar to Graham Potter, with not a massive budget. He's had to work with what he's got. He's got some good players in. He's got some good loans in. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when the loans aren't there, whether he can keep the loans and whether he'll replace them with. But for his first season managing the Premier League, what an incredible job he's done. So the top three for me would be Moyes, Potter and Vieira. In what order? I think Thomas Frank has done a great job as well, don't get me wrong. And I think getting Christian Eriksen in January was an absolute masterstroke, to be fair. Because he, you know, they were looking on a bit of a bad run, weren't they? And he came in straight away, improved them. But any of those three or four really for me. But yeah, I agree. Don't give it to Pep. Don't give it to Pep. Don't give it to Klopp. They win everything else, you know. And they're not necessarily the best managers. They're at the clubs that have got the ambition and they've got the money and they've got the best players. See, their job's easy. Graham Potter's job is difficult. David Moyes' job is difficult. Thomas Frank's job is difficult. Vieira's job's difficult. And yet they've done remarkably well with what they've got. And I think that needs to be taken into account. So, I mean, I love Graham Potter, so I'd like to give it to him. But Patrick Vieira, no one said Patrick Vieira, so I'll go with Patrick Vieira.
Well, let's remember as well, as the fans were chanting, he kicks who he wants, he kicks who he wants.
He does, yeah.
Got it all going for him. Right then, let's have a look at the bottom, because that was as fascinating as the top, wasn't it? Sean Dyche, was it a mistake for Burnley to get rid? Paul?
I was delighted that Burnley got rid of Sean Dyche, because I think if Sean Dyche stayed in charge of Burnley, that they would have stayed up. I couldn't understand the logic of getting rid of an experienced manager who'd had years of knowledge of how to keep the team in the Premier Division, and to take a gamble on a rookie manager to try and keep it up for the last 7-8 games of the season. I just think it was a massive gamble for them to take. And I think, what Sean Dyche achieved at Burnley, we talk Managers of the Year award, that year he got Burnley into Europe. I mean, that deserved an award in its own right. Always raised to Sean Dyche. I think, when you think of the budget that Burnley have had over the years, he doesn't buy players particularly, but the ones he has, he improves for his players. He plays for the system, and I was absolutely delighted when Sean Dyche was sacked, because I think I mentioned on a previous conversation with you and Mitch, Tom, that when Burnley beat us 3-2, and that was Dyche's last home game in charge, I think, for Burnley, I thought we were down then. I thought Dyche was going to keep them up. Unfortunately, Burnley panicked after 2-1 defeat at Norwich, and then decided to move them on. I'm not really friendly with any Burnley fans as such, but from what I've seen about their comments on social media when they went down there, I think lots of them were still feeling it was a very strange decision to get rid of a manager who's kept you in the top division season after season after season.
Quite disrespectful as well, wasn't it? Because he did that job so well with nothing.
Yeah, exactly, Tom. And I think, we talked before about whether United panicked getting rid of Solskjaer too early. We barely absolutely did panic getting rid of Dyche, because I have no doubt he would have got them finished outside the bottom three, whether that would have been above us, which I dread thing, or above Leeds. He would have kept them up. And I think that last home game of the season when Burnley played Newcastle, I think if Dyche is in charge and Burnley need to win that game, with Dyche in charge, they get the win. With Michael Jackson, I just don't think he had the experience to get them over the line. Yeah, well, he must have done better.
It's been gold for the audio. He really has.
If you look at Dyche's record as well as Burnley manager, there's always been spells with Burnley and Dyche when they appear to be going down a little bit, they're losing 4 to 5 games on the run, and he always kind of brings them back up and gets them back to a respectable position in the Premier League. And although there was a bit of a new manager bounce from Michael Jackson, I think they won the first 2 or 3 games. The last 4 or 5 games, they didn't win anything. And they're the games that keep you up. And I think undoubtedly Sean Dyche would have kept them up.
Mitch, how are Leeds going to fare under Jesse Marsch, or he's our own Ted Lasso, isn't he? No offence, but how's he going to cope? Has he got to flog people off to get people in? What's the situation down there?
I'm very happy that Leeds survived, because like as an American, like I wanted Jesse Marsch to be able to succeed, because I feel like it's just very hard for Americans to succeed in England. With just like there's a lot of just like media pressure and stuff like that. Like, I mean, Bob Bradley didn't exactly set a good example for a lot of American managers that want to be in the Premier League. So very pleased that he survived. I think that one of the keys was that I think he's just a little more of a chilled out version tactically of Bielsa, where he is kind of playing a little more of the like high pressing kind of way. But I think Bielsa's way of playing kind of caught up to him. Like when Arsenal played against them in the first time, they had an actual just injury crisis where they had like a 15-year-old on their bench. Like it was like brutal. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, like you can kind of chalk up some of Leeds' like issues this season to Bamford and Calvin Phillips and other key players being injured. But like also you have to at some point draw a line to, I mean, if you're going to be pressing this hard for this long, you're going to run into some issues every once in a while. Like if you don't have a deep squad and your entire thing is like murder ball, you're just like constantly running, constantly going. And I can't imagine his training sessions were like super relaxing and stuff like that, and gave them a lot of downtime. So yeah, it made sense that some of the injuries caught up to him. I think it's the inverse of the Burnley thing, where they got rid of a good manager for them who has done a lot of good, and they were still able to survive, because I think Leeds did the smart thing of letting go early. I think if Burnley, like I think Sean Dyche is an excellent manager. I think if they kept him, they had a better chance of survival, because he's made a deal with the devil to be able to make sure that Burnley's been in the Premier League this long. And I think Leeds did an intelligent thing by sacking Bielsa earlier, and then bringing in someone who they didn't drastically have to change systems for. So I've got hopes for Jesse Marsch. They just bought Brennan Aronson from RB Salzburg. Very excited to see him in the Premier League. I'm a big fan of his. I think it's going to be a big jump for him to come from Austria to the Premier League. But I think he's a player that can potentially do it. I really, really like watching him with the U.S. men's national team. I think he's a really, really talented player. And I think Leeds are a solid team. Like they have a lot of good pieces. If they can hang on to a couple, like by surviving, I think they're pretty much set to hang on to Calvin Phillips. They might lose Rafinha, but if they replace well and like they keep building on like the foundations they have, which I think are pretty decent, I think they could be really solid candidates to finish mid-table. I don't know if I've seen enough of Jesse Marsch to be like, oh my God, he's their savior. He's going to like bring them into Europe. Like Leeds are going to be like Leeds are back. But I don't think he is by any means a bad manager that's going to like they're going to be in a relegation fight again. It's hard for me to be truly objective, because I really, really want him to succeed. I want him to set a precedent for American coaches and stuff like that to be able to make successful moves to Europe, because you just don't see it. Like, he's like one of the very, very few American coaches that are in Europe right now. And if American soccer is going to grow, I'm going to call it soccer when I'm talking about American.
Yes.
I'll call it football in every other context.
Just stop now. Stop now with that soccer. Wow.
If we want like American soccer to grow and the sport to grow in the States, I think we need to have like a bigger presence where like, oh, it, like someone starts watching it and they're like, oh, Leeds is an American manager and like an exciting young and American player. Like, oh yeah, I'll start following this. I think it's a decent gateway into like, I was almost an Everton fan because when I started following, Tim Howard played for them. So I mean, it can do a lot of good to like just have that kind of like connection. So we'll see how they do next season. I'm hopeful that they aren't exactly in a relegation dogfight like they were this year.
2 bits left, chaps. You should have bought your sleeping bag, shouldn't you, really? Rich, let's talk about Everton. Paul, cover your ears. What do they need to avoid a wretched season under Fat Frank next year?
I mean, to be honest, I don't think that this season was necessarily a reflection of where Everton are. I just think they had one of those seasons which can happen. You know, they made the wrong managerial appointment, didn't they, at the beginning, with Benitez. It was never going to fit about Everton anyway. And, you know, it was just one of them seasons. I mean, I'm expecting Everton to be okay next season, you know, probably mid-table-ish, round about there, without any problems, really. I mean, I did think this season was just one of them one-off seasons for them that, you know, could have been the one that, you know, they go through the trapdoor, because we've seen it happen before with clubs. Leeds did it, didn't they? Years ago, got relegated, and it's happened to a lot of big clubs before. So, personally, for me, I'm glad they survived, because they're a big club. And when you look at some of the teams that's got promoted, you know, Bournemouth, for example, should Bournemouth be in the Premier League or not Everton? I don't think so. But anyway, that's from a historic perspective. So I was glad Everton survived. But it's just strange, isn't it, that all of those sort of bottom 5 teams that were battling relegation all changed their manager at different various points through the season to try to, you know, and to me, it's like if you didn't trust your manager at the start of the season to keep you up, why would you start the season with that manager? It didn't make sense. And yes, maybe Everton was slightly different, because I'm sure Everton wasn't expecting to be in a relegation battle at the start of the season. I wouldn't have thought they would have been. But certainly you'd have expected Norwich and Watford to have been. You'd have expected Burnley to have been, because they generally are. And Leeds, you know, maybe not so much. But I don't know. I just find it strange that they were all the teams that got rid of their manager, didn't they? And with various different degrees of success. Now, Frank Lampard came in at Everton, and I've got to be honest, I've never particularly liked Frank Lampard because of his Chelsea connection and all that kind of stuff, right? And he didn't do a great job at Chelsea overall, did he? He didn't have a bad first season, but then he fell away a bit afterwards. But what you've got to say is he's gone in at Everton, and the one thing that he did was he got that group of players to play for him and to play for the club and to play for the fans. And you could see that. I mean, that last game, their last home game, when they came from 2-0 down against Crystal Palace, funnily enough, you know, not many teams in the Premier League, at any position in that league, would have come back from 2-0 down at that particular time. The fact that he got them in the changing room, and they've done it a couple of times, haven't they, under Frank? But, you know, he's turned things around for them. And to me, that's a sign of a manager who has got the players on his side. He can motivate them, and he can, you know, when things aren't going well, he's able to make certain changes tactically and stuff like that to turn the game around. And he's done that a few times with Everton. And in the end, that was what kept them up. You know, those comeback results that they had towards the end of the season is what saved Everton. And Frank Lampard was the reason for that. You know, I totally agree about Sean Dyche. If Burnley had kept Sean Dyche, they would have stayed up 100%. We can't doubt that at all. So that was a mistake by them. Would Everton have been a team to drop down? I think it would have been Leeds, actually. As it turned out, anyway, I think it would have been Leeds to have gone down. But in terms of Everton, you know, I think that next season they won't have any problems. You know, and with maybe 1 or 2 decent signings, you know, they need to keep hold of, obviously, Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin. There's talk of him maybe leaving, possibly coming to us. Maybe we'll maybe talk about that. But with 1 or 2 signings, I think Everton are, not only will they be fine, I mean, mid-table-ish, they could possibly be pushing that top 8 potentially, because I think Frank Lampard has got them playing for him and for the club. You know, and the support there at Goodison Park in those last few home games of the season, that game against Crystal Palace, the atmosphere in that ground was, I mean, I've seen so many videos of that game, and it's just incredible. And that's the sort of thing, that's what you want to see at football. That's what we go to football for. We go to football to experience those moments. Yes, you don't want it to be because you're fighting relegation. You want it to be because you're challenging to win trophies. But ultimately, it doesn't matter, does it? You know, when to be a part of something like that, an atmosphere like that, and a moment like that. You know, when Calvert-Lewin got that goal near the end to make it 3-2. You know, that was like the atmosphere there and the celebrations. That's like winning the league, isn't it? It's that as intense, it probably more so actually, because it was more important for Everton to survive in the Premier League than it would be for Man City to win the Premier League. You could see the difference in the celebrations actually. The Everton game, although Man City came from 2-0 down to win that game, the Everton game had a lot more of an impact on me as a football fan watching it. The emotions and how much more important that was for Everton to have won that game and to have stayed up. And I was pleased that they did, because I wouldn't have wanted to have sent Everton down on the last day of the season. I wouldn't have wanted to do that. I'd have been wanting Arsenal not to win that game on the basis that I wouldn't have wanted us to relegate them. So I was glad they were safe, because we didn't have to go through that. You know, that would have been horrible. But that was fantastic. And I think Frank Lampard's done a great job in the little time that he had, because he didn't have a great deal of time, did he? He couldn't buy anybody because the transfer window wasn't open. He had to get them players together, and he had to make them produce results, because I agree with what the comment before. They looked like they were down. It did. I thought Everton were going to go down probably a month ago. They looked almost nailed on to go down. So what Frank Lampard did is brilliant in that short period of time. And if he can do this, if he can get those players together next season, 1 or 2 additions in, I think Everton could do okay next season. But they could be an outsider to win the FA Cup or something like that. You know, it's the sort of team sometimes. Oh, Leicester did, didn't they? They survived relegation and had a really great season the season after. I'm not saying Everton will win the Premier League next year, because I'm pretty sure they won't. But I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe won the League Cup or the FA Cup or so, or decent runs. I can see that happening with Everton next season if they obviously keep their key players and add 1 or 2, because the way they finish the season, that amount of heart gets your rewards if you've got that heart in your team. What Everton showed at the end of the season, and that was good. I enjoyed watching Everton do that. Actually, it was just brilliant to see, and it was great. The atmosphere and everything, it was brilliant. And I think they'll do all right next year, definitely.
Right, let's have a quick run round. Player of the season, Rich. Before we move on to Jay and go round in a circle, who's your player of the season? Can be Arsenal player, can be someone else.
He's definitely not going to be an Arsenal player, is it? Let's be honest. Player of the season. I mean, that's quite interesting. I mean. There's been a few players. The player that I was maybe... There's a couple of players that probably won't get any mentioned anywhere else. Conor Gallagher.
Oh, we've lost him. He's gone. He's just like a little statue, isn't he? Rich, if you could hear us, we'll come back to you when you unfreeze yourself. Jay, are you still mobile? Who's your player of the season, Jay?
Yeah. Obviously, the De Bruyne, he's had a fine season, and especially in that last game, he stepped up. Just one for me, one to watch, and I mentioned him earlier, but Luis Diaz at Liverpool, he looks superb. I'm not saying he's player of the year this year, but if we're doing this time next year, we could be saying Diaz. I mean, I'm trying to think. My mind's gone completely blank.
What about for Arsenal, Jay? Oh, he's gone. He's entirely given up the ghost. Look, he's fallen off the radar.
I think talking about Everton's worn him out.
I think for us, I think Saka's had a good season, but Ødegaard's probably the most consistent. I'm just trying to think for the rest of the league. Oh, he's back.
He's back on. Hello, Rich. We're just finishing off that part of player of the season. So Jay's just gone for De Bruyne, but he's mentioned Ødegaard and Saka for the Arsenal. Go on, Jay, carry on.
No, I'm just trying to think. My mind's gone completely blank.
Well, you're a Chelsea fan.
Boom. Yeah. I'll go with De Bruyne. I know it's a very easy answer, but I mean, Ronaldo's had a good season. Nobody would have.
Hey, look, Paul, you've been promoted. Look, you've come from the bottom row and you've come up the top. So there's a bonus. Sorry, Jay.
Yeah,
It's an
Ronaldo's
over.
had a good season, and obviously we're not going to include anyone from that lot. So, yeah, I'll go with De Bruyne. I'll take the easy answer.
Mitch?
Alisson. Alisson has been the best player in the Premier League week in and week out for the entire year. It's rare to see a goalkeeper kind of win that award. He wasn't even nominated for the Premier League Player of the Season award, even though he is the player of the season. I think he just in every single statistical category as a goalkeeper is again far above the rest. Yeah, he's my player of the season for the Premier League. And then for Arsenal, I'd say Saka, hands down. Odegaard, fantastic season, but Saka has been our best player the entire year.
Yeah, De Bruyne for me. I can't go past that really. But Saka for Arsenal. Right then, let's get on to the last chewy bit, which is Arteta. Various opinions on Arteta's reign. So let's have that. Let's have a little discussion. Contract renewal, is it reward for failure or for exceeding expectations? Let's have a neutral. Come on, Paul, tell us what you think of the Arteta reign at the moment.
Well, obviously, me, Arteta played for Everton for a number of seasons. So I've always had a soft spot for Mikel Arteta. Yeah, I mean, and outside looking at Arsenal, I think like I said this last week, I think Arteta's done really well in terms of bringing through young talent. So that's why young players, bringing them into the team. I think the recruitment's been quite good. He's moved on lots of debt. You mentioned Aubameyang before. He's moved on players who weren't performing. I think the big question mark for me would be that he's got to improve his record against top four teams. I think his record against teams outside the top four is pretty impressive, and also generally win against teams who aren't competing for the European places. However, Arsenal's record against the top four, to me, is as an Arsenal fan, that would cause me some concern. And that's something that's an area the manager definitely needs to improve upon. And I always know, like, when Arsenal are playing away and I'm playing against Liverpool, it's going to be a 3-4-0 win for Liverpool, because Arsenal don't appear to have that resilience or resolve to go to sort of grounds like Tottenham did this season and get a result and get a draw and get something on the mat. So from a neutral perspective, I think he's done a reasonable job. I mean, I know Rich mentioned before about Graham Potter. I mean, Graham Potter, also 1 or 2 seasons down the line, is a really interesting prospect, because I can see he could bring something to the team. I think, if you look at what he's done at Brighton with the results he had there, given the results at Tottenham, I think he could do a fabulous job there. But yeah, I mean, if I was given Arteta a mark out of 10 for the season, he just missed out in the Champions League place. But as Jay said, it was very, very close. I mean, one win either way during the season. Arsenal in the Champions League, and suddenly the view on the season is Arteta's done okay. I think the fact that that Arsenal didn't qualify, but B, he didn't qualify because Tottenham took that final place. I think that's magnified the pressure on Arteta a little bit. So I think overall he's done a good job in the circumstances. And we keep using the phrase that next season is going to be a key season. I think that for Arteta and Arsenal, it's going to be a massive season next season, and to see, can they get in that top 4 places? Can they secure a Champions League position? But even more important, can they go away to City, to Liverpool, and at least get a draw, and not just concede 2 or 3, 4 goals and the game's over before you even got to the hour mark?
Just saying that though, when we played City, I thought we were far and away the better team. Far and away. Rich, let's get your opinion on Mr. Arteta. Spanish Michael.
I mean, where do I start, really, honestly? I mean, to be honest, I think Mikel Arteta is the kind of exactly the sort of manager that the board at Arsenal would go for, because the board lack ambition for the club. They don't want the club to be a serious title challenging club, a team to be challenging for the Champions League. They're quite happy just muddling along, doing things on the cheap. And that was the reason why we went for Arteta. We could have got Ancelotti at the same time, because he went to Everton and the same day they were sitting in the stands, wasn't they? Arteta was about to take over at Arsenal, Ancelotti about to take over. It should have been the other way round. Mikel Arteta, former Everton player, that would have been a great job for him to start his managerial career. And going back to what Jay said earlier about Manchester City, I've never ever liked watching Man City play under Pep. I find it boring. I don't like their style of football. And what Arteta's done is he's brought that exact same style of football to Arsenal. So for the last 2 years, apart from the fact that we've lost 26 league games in those 2 seasons, I've not really enjoyed watching us play. It's not the sort of football I enjoy. You know, I like to see a centre forward. I like to see that kind of, maybe not so much, you know, going back in time sort of style, but even, you know, I like to see a different style of football to what we've been seeing under Mikel Arteta. And I don't necessarily blame him for everything. I think that the board are the problem at Arsenal. They've got no ambition for the club. And that's one thing that really annoys me and that upsets me, because, you know, Arsenal have always been, well, certainly for nearly 100 years now, have always been a club that we've had the traditions and the standards. You know, when I first started watching Arsenal in the early 1980s, although we wasn't particularly good on the pitch, well, I say we wasn't particularly good, we were doing about the same as we're doing now, finishing 5th and stuff like that. But we wasn't challenging for honours. But even then, the traditions of the club, and that was the one thing that really drew me in. You know, Highbury, the marble halls, and the history, and the hill woods, and just the tradition of the club. And that's just gone, completely gone, right? And I wouldn't mind that so much if we had a board in place that had ambitions for the club in the way that David Dean did. All David Dean cared about was making Arsenal the best Arsenal that he could be, right? The Cronkies don't care about making Arsenal anything other than what money they might be able to cream off it. That's all. And Arteta's a victim of that in many ways. Now, he may well turn out to be a very good coach or good manager somewhere else. I kind of look on him a little bit as Terry Neal. If you remember the Terry Neal days, he was a young manager when he came to Arsenal. He'd had very little experience, but he'd had some experience. He'd been manager of Hull, I think it was, player manager. Obviously, he was manager at Tottenham as well. But he'd had minimal experience, very young, obviously former Arsenal captain. And he did okay. He had a reasonably decent team, did really well in some cup competitions, but was never, ever good enough to put a challenge in for the league. And I think that's where we are with Mikel Arteta. I think we may do the odd thing in cups here and there. We've won an FA Cup already. But when it comes to the nitty-gritty, challenging for the Champions League, challenging for the Premier League, I don't, you know, yes, at this moment, the club aren't in that position anyway. But Arteta, for me, isn't good enough tactically. He's too rigid. He thinks he's Pep. He thinks he wants to become Pep. He wants to play Pep style of football. You know, everyone's going, oh, we need a centre forward. We need a centre forward. Well, Arteta doesn't want a centre forward. He's been there. He's had 5 transfer wins. Hasn't bought one. What does that tell you? And he's got rid of his biggest goal scorer that he had, which was Aubameyang. He stopped Lacazette scoring goals completely. Lacazette's gone from scoring 15, 17 goals a season to scoring 6. 4 of which were penalties. So he stopped him scoring. It's like he doesn't want his centre forwards to score goals. He wants his centre forwards to cover for the left back, or he wants his centre forwards to play on the halfway line. And then everybody wonders why we don't score enough goals. Well, that's why. You know, our top scorer this season, Bukayo Saka, scored 12 goals. The last top goal scorer scored as few as that was 1982. Right, 40 years ago was the last time an Arsenal top scorer only scored 12 goals. Right, and that was with Terry Neal, funnily enough. In a so-called rebuild after Stapleton and Brady left. We're in exactly the same situation as we were then, right? It took us until we got George Graham 4 or 5 years later to go and have any sort of success, right? And that's where we are at the minute, right? Arteta is for me, he hasn't done anything in the turn up. Giving him a contract when we just lost those 3 games in a row. We were, you know, yes, you could say we were unlucky to not get 4th. We were 2 points off, right? In the position that we were in, I don't care it was Tottenham that got it particularly. What I care about is the way we threw that away. The performance against Newcastle was disgusting. The worst performance I've ever seen in 45 years watching Arsenal, ever. The worst performance I've ever seen in a game that meant so much. The game against Tottenham, you know, just ridiculous. Rob Holding, you know, surely as a coach, you can't send your player out and let him perform like that. When he got his first booking, everybody was screaming, he's going to get sent off. Take him off. Just take him off. It doesn't matter who else. He get to go off anyway. You know, just terrible management. He can't change things. Once this season, we went behind and won a game. And that was against Wolves. Once. All season. I think we only did it twice last season. He can't change things. He's very rigid tactically. And I think his man management of certain players has been absolutely terrible. And that's what's cost us. Why didn't we buy in January? Did we not buy in January? Because, yes, the owners probably didn't have the money, firstly. But if they did have the money, the players that we can buy under Arteta are very, very small number of players that will fit into his system that he will be able to work with. He couldn't work with half the players that he had, even though they won us the FA Cup, even though they got to Europa League final. We couldn't work with them. So we had to get rid of them. Yes, the club wanted to get rid of some wages as well, and that was part of it. But the players that we're going to buy, I reckon he's got a list of about 5 players. Now, the only 5 players that are available that he can actually work with. And even then, he bought Tavares. He's going to have to replace him now because he's not good enough. He bought Pablo Mari. He's already replaced him. I don't trust him to spend money when the players he's bought so far, apart from one or two, Thomas Partey, decent player, always injured. So the jury's out on him. Ben White paid 50 million for him. Is he a 50 million pound defender when we had William Saliba out on loan? I'm not sure. Aaron Ramsdale did well for 3 months, and then he's been terrible. We've got Bernd Leno, who's a much better overall goalkeeper, but he doesn't fit Arteta's system because he can't play out from the back of his feet. You know, he got Ben White because he's good with his feet. He's not a really good defender, but he's good with his feet on the ball. So we're very, very restricted in what we can do. And I think we're going to have the next 3 or 4 years, if we keep Arteta for the length of this contract, my worry is we're going to have 3 or 4 years of battling between 8th and 5th. That's where we're going to be every single season, battling in that place. Because we're not good enough to, you know, look at the managers that we said before, Conte, top manager, Pep, Klopp, top managers. All these clubs have got Manchester United now. We don't really know his reputation yet. He's not done anything, but we'll see what he does. But there's some top managers in the Premier League. And the more top managers that come in, the further down we're going to go under Arteta, because the club aren't going to spend the money, and Arteta isn't going to buy the players that we want as fans because they don't fit him. They don't fit into the system that he wants, and he can't manage them. Guendouzi, what is Guendouzi doing out on loan when he's better than every other midfielder that we've got, apart from Thomas Partey? When Thomas Partey was injured, we had to play El Neni, and Guendouzi's out on loan winning Player of the Month in France. And he was brilliant for us.
Is that not to do with attitude, though, Rich? Is Arteta basically going for an attitude?
No, I agree, it is. But ultimately, if you're a manager, what you've got to do is unless you're Man City, you can just buy players whoever you like. You've got to get the best out of what you've got. You've got to manage that player, right? Aubameyang's attitude, we know, probably wasn't the best at the end, and he had problems in some of his previous clubs. But if you're a man in January, what you say is, right, you say to the board, can we get a striker to replace Aubameyang in January? If the club say no, then what you do is you get Aubameyang to one side and say, look, you can go at the end of the season, but you've got to give me everything at the end of the season. We've got a chance to get the top 4. We need your goals. And you manage that player. And I don't think Arteta's been able to do that with several players. And that worries me because we can't afford to just, you know, we've got rid of all these players on big wages, and some of them were the right decision by the club, I agree with. But what you can't do in January when you're 4th in the table is sell your top goal scorer, and he still was our top goal scorer, and not replace him. You either sort that relationship out, get him to play till the end of the season, or you get a replacement. You can't do neither. And that is down to, I believe, that's more down to Arteta's man management of that situation than it was to the club. Apparently, we were after Vlahovic. Vlahovic didn't want to come. Why would he? Why would he want to come? Why would any top player want to play for a rookie manager who's made constantly mistakes? 26 league games in 2 seasons we've lost. People say we made it.
Rich, there was an interesting thing. You saying we haven't got Champions League or anything like that. I was talking to someone, and someone said, "Yeah, that's a good point, a valid point. But when Arsenal come knocking, it's a different type of knock." And I think
previously, I would agree with you. Previously, I would agree with you. But if Arteta knocked on my door and I was a top player, I'll be like, what have you achieved in the game as a manager? What makes me think that you're going to take Arsenal to another level? Show me the proof that you've got. There isn't any. It doesn't exist because there isn't any. And yes, sometimes you've got to take a chance on a young manager, right? But Arsenal haven't been in a position, and we're certainly not in a position now to take that risk, really. What we needed was when Emery didn't work, you know, at least they made an appointment with Emery with a little bit of ambition. The club showed a bit of ambition because Emery had won Europa Leagues and he had the experience. And you look, that's not a bad appointment. It didn't work. So after that, what you want to see is a club showing a bit of ambition. Ancelotti, for me, would have been an unbelievable choice, but he would have wanted too much money. Then the club went for the cheap option. But why they picked Arteta? How has Arteta gone from being the coach at Man City to be manager of one of the biggest clubs in the world? How on earth has that happened? How did he get that job when he'd not managed anybody else before? It's just crazy in the situation that we were in at the time that we were in you know, getting through that Emery situation, which was a difficult transition from Wenger. Let's get it right. A difficult transition that was, and the club has been mismanaged for a number of years before that as well. And so we needed somebody who could manage that situation, who could manage with tight budgets, who could, you know, get the best out of the players that he's got, could be a little bit more flexible, able to work with a wider group of players. And all these things haven't happened. And for me now, this summer and next season are massive. Because if Arsenal don't do at least as well again, i.e. 5th or higher next season, or we don't win the Europa League, either of those 2 things don't happen, I don't see how we can keep him. Because that will be 4 seasons in a row of failure. And that's not good enough for a club like Arsenal. We're not a charity. We can afford to take on a young manager, give him a chance, give him his experience, work experience for 4 years. No, I'm sorry. For me, we're at a crossroads. Actually, the season that Everton just had, I don't think we're far away from something like that. Or equally, we could be pushing on for the top 4. But we are in a very, very big. At the moment, the squad is far too weak. Right, we're not going to buy 6 or 7, 8, 9 players this summer to fill that squad out. And if we do, they're going to be cheap teenagers, which is not what we need. And other teams are going to be improving a lot more quickly. And all this thing about a rebuild, Arsenal have been rebuilding for 40 years, 50 years, probably forever, because you get a team and you have to constantly rebuild it all the time because players reach the peak and they get past their peak or they get injured or whatever it is. And I just can't see, I've never been more disillusioned with the way Arsenal are being run. And that's not all on Arteta. I just think Arteta is not the right man to get us through this really difficult period. And unfortunately, with these owners, it probably wouldn't matter who we got, if I'm honest. We're still not going to challenge for the league title. But are we able to sustain what was a season that was a strange season and we almost got Champions League? But the way we threw it away is worrying for me, really worrying. And I don't know, I'm really worried about where we're going. And this summer, unless we get in experienced players and not just a load more teenagers or 21-year-olds, I can see next season being really, really difficult for us. Really, really difficult. And I don't just mean difficult in terms of getting top 4. The top 4, I can't see us getting if we don't make the right signings this summer. And even if we do, it's still going to be difficult because of the improvements that's happening elsewhere at a faster rate. It's all very well said, these players might be good in 3 or 4 years' time. They might be. Will Saka still be in 3 or 4 years' time if we're still rattling around in the Europa League or not in Europe at all? Will Smith Rowe want to stay? Will Martinelli want to stay? These are questions that are unanswered at this moment in time. And the next year in particular, now he's got that contract, there's no pressure on him really, because he's just been given a contract for what? As Tom rightly said, has he been rewarded for failure? To me, it was a failure this season. We're not going to get many opportunities to be in the top 4 in the next few years with the way the league's building up around us. This was our big opportunity and we blew it. And we blew it. We didn't just blow it, we absolutely chucked it away. That game against Newcastle, we had to win. The way we played in that game was I just couldn't understand what was going on. What was he doing as a manager? What did he do in that game to deserve a new contract? In that game alone, I would have sacked him after that Newcastle game, just for the ineptability of his tactical decisions in that game. The substitutions, the team shape, and everyone's saying, we're tired. Why are we tired? We played 40 games. How are we tired? Liverpool played 63 games. And they were still running around in that Champions League final like it meant something. We had a big opportunity in that game against Newcastle, and we just did not play. We just didn't play. We had no shape. We had no ideas, and that comes from the manager, 100%. A lot of the other issues are the owners, and I accept that. But ultimately, that game in particular, and the way that we threw it away, we lost 6 of our last 12 games in the league. 6 of our last 12 games, and we expected to get top 4. That's not top 4 form. If we'd been lower down the league, we'd have been battling to keep mid-table, wouldn't we? With 6 defeats in 12 games at the end of the season. I bet Everton didn't have 6 defeats in the last 12 games.
Jay, I just want to point out that because a lot of people are going on about Spurs and that they've done us, mugged us up, which they have really. Spurs, top manager, 2 great goal scorers, but they only had a +8 in front of us and conceded 8 goals less. So it's kind of just balancing that point out. I just thought I'd point it out because I had an email on it. What's your thoughts on Arteta, Jay?
Before we kicked off against Brentford, what were your expectations for this season?
I would say, I said it on my
Be
show.
realistic. Tell the truth.
Yeah, no,
tell the
realistic.
truth.
What I said was between 4th and 6th and winning a trophy because we had no Europe and we'd spent the most money in the Premier League last summer. So that was my minimum expectations, but that's what we should be looking at as a club to achieve.
So your minimum expectations was 4th.
No, it was 4th or a trophy. We didn't get 4th, winning a trophy.
I think most Arsenal supporters, before we kicked off against that first whistle went against Brentford, I don't think many expected us to finish 4th. I think you need to be realistic here. As the season goes on, I think your expectations change. So we had a bad start, and then we hit some form. And
Were you ever convinced though? Were you ever convinced? You know, we had that good run of, we had some good wins. We had a good run of wins, didn't we? Just after that bad start, we started slowly. That Norwich game was a bit nervy, and Burnley was a bit nervy, and we started to play all right. But even on that run, I think 10 games it was unbeaten. I was never convinced. You know,
I tell you
you
what,
always knew this beat was coming, and they were coming. You could just, and even later on when we had another good run, I was never convinced by the way we were playing. We never looked convincing in any game.
There were two results that did well, I would say convince, I suppose, did show me something a little bit different. Was away at Leicester and away at Villa, where I thought, you know what, we've dug in here, we've won difficult games. Losing 13 games in a season is unacceptable. But we've won more than Chelsea. We won more than the European champions. You know, you were just championing Frank Lampard and the job he did at Everton. Lampard for me should never have got the Everton job because he hasn't achieved anything, whereas Arteta has won a trophy. And I think as the season's gone on, I think the supporters, the fan base in general, you have to adjust your expectations. And I think going into, I mean, don't get me wrong, the Newcastle game wasn't very good. Spurs away wasn't very good, but they weren't the games where for me that worried me the most. It was the home defeat to Brighton, away at Palace was really bad, and the Southampton game. Those three results were poor. But for me, as the season went on, and I just talking about myself, I adjusted my own expectations based on what I'm seeing on the pitch. We played like a young team that was naive, and we've got a slightly naive manager. So in certain situations, when you put those two things together, they can't, when it comes to these high pressure situations, you need the experienced players to get you through. And I think Arteta was naive, and I think there was the naivety in the young, you know, they're a young side. And when you put those two things together, we're going to slip up. And I think for me personally, is looking back at the season now, I think we've had a fairly good season for me. And I've said it many times on this pod. All I want to see as a supporter is progress, is improvement. And I think there are a lot of aspects of this Arsenal team that I have seen progress. You know, I've seen
progress from where though, Dave? Where have we progressed from?
We're coming from a low level. Yeah, no, but Arteta didn't take us back to it. This was a combination of Emery. This is a combination of not just the owners, but you're talking Gazidis, Sanyehi, you know, really bad management, really bad spending, really, you know, like we talk a combination of all different things. I don't blame Arteta for taking us down. I think Arteta sat down with Edu and they said, right, we're going to go on this path and we're going to try and, like I said about Man United, we try and go for a reset, get rid of the bad eggs or whatever you want to call them at the expense of the odd bad performance. And there has been some bad ones this season. You know, the Forest game in the FA Cup wasn't good, and Arteta's not perfect, but I kind of think this season it's more, I know, and it shouldn't be a learning curve, but it's been a learning curve for some of those young players, and it's been an even bigger learning curve for Arteta because it's the first season where he's at a full stadium, and it's the first season where he's been fully backed. So for me,
would you have given him that new contract at the point that we offered it to him, or would you have waited and see how he does next season and then brought about a new contract?
But there's two ways to look at it. That can work. If we'd have got in the Champions League, that's a great decition. You know, we were at a point where we've slipped up a few times.
Do it at that point, then offer him it at that point.
Yeah, but it can be seen as a show of faith, can't it? Where others are jumping ship, or others are getting rid of managers or whatever. We're showing faith.
But why should he show faith in the manager that failed in what he had to do, which was finish that job?
But how can it be failure if we've gone from 8th to very close to being in Europe? And if we're in the Champions League, if we're in the Champions League, I think that's exceeded pretty much everybody's expectations for this season, even your own. I don't seriously.
No, at the start of the season, no. But what you're not
we would finish 4th.
No, but
I don't think any Arsenal supporter would. I don't think any Arsenal supporter would have turned around and said, we're going to finish 4th. I think,
they wouldn't.
Like Paul said, the fact that Spurs got it amplifies it. It makes it worse. If it was Man United that got it and
doesn't.
Spurs finished behind us, I think we're looking at it differently. I think, look, we all wanted Champions League. We so badly did, and we were so close. I think we've gone from...
Why didn't we get it? Why didn't we get it when we were so far ahead at one point with games in hand? And even with 2 games to go, we just needed 2 wins.
Because
it was in our hands. Why did we not get it?
Because it's the naivety. We were putting massive amount of faith in...
Whose fault's that?
Your Sakas. Just bear with me. Your Sakas, your ESRs, your Martinellis. These players that have got us to this point, when the pressure's not entirely, it's not ramped up that much. When the pressure, because we all know football's not just a technical game, it's a mental game. It's all about temperament. And losing certain players really, really hurt us. Thomas Partey's an experienced midfielder. We could have done with him.
Absolutely.
And for me, it's the naivety in the squad. For the use of a better term, our arse fell out at the end. That's what happened.
What caused that? What caused that? What caused the inexperience in the squad? What caused us to be in a situation where we were battling for top 4?
We should have gone out in January and bought someone. Yeah. But are you telling me Arteta didn't go to Edu or didn't go to Josh and say, I want 50 million. I want to go. Every manager wants to sign players, every single one. And I would put my house and car on it that he went to Edu and said, I want players, I want money. And Josh would have turned around and gone, well, I tell you what, make do with what you've got, and in the summer we're going to back you. Because look, you're very naive if you think Arteta did not bash down the door and say,
No, I'm not saying he didn't want to sign.
He would have gone demanding players.
We'd have to hope he wanted to sign. Yeah, I'm sure he
would have gone and signed someone. But at the end of the day,
let's just bear in mind that Arteta came in. There was very limited choices, weren't there, for replacing Emery. But when he came in, he had COVID. I'm not making excuses here, but as you said, you had all these cretins behind the scenes like Gazidas. We've been on the slippery slope here for about 15 years and a little bit before. The Emirates has cost us as a team the quality and the ability to go forward. That's where we're at. We had to find someone. To come in with a new idea, and as you called it, a reset button. So Arteta is that man. It could have been Graham Potter. It could have been someone else. But Arteta's there now.
Why wasn't Emery backed to the same degree? Why wasn't Emery backed at that time? But Arteta's been given everything he's wanted. All the players that he's wanted, he's been given, even though some of them haven't worked. Emery wasn't given anybody he wanted. He was given players that...
Gazidas isn't there anymore, probably.
No. Yeah, no, but even so, if you've got a manager, you either back your manager or you don't. If you don't back your manager, they've got no chance, right? Emery had no chance of succeeding because he wasn't backed. If he'd been given half the backing Arteta's been given, we wouldn't probably be in this. We'd be in the Champions League already, probably, because he'd have got the players he wanted, and it is a more experienced manager who's proven himself at the top level.
We were a shambles under Emery.
We're a shambles now.
If you look at the two, we're not a shambles now. If you look at those two sides, look at the way we defended, look at the certain players we had in the team, how the players just...
48 goals we conceded last season. 48 goals.
I'm not saying we're perfect, far from it. But if you're comparing the two teams, Arteta's Arsenal and Emery's Arsenal, I mean, God, we were a shambles under Emery.
Well, where did we finish under Emery? Where did we finish in the league under Emery? How many points did we get? Where did we do in Europe?
We got Emery humiliated in the Europa League final.
Did we not get to a final in Europe?
Talk about
did we not get to a final? Did we not finish 5th in the league? The same. How was that team a shambles and this team not a shambles when they finished in exactly the same position and Emery's team got more points? And Emery's team had a European campaign and got to the final.
That side was full of established, your Mustafis, your Ozils, your Socrates. These players, we're in a completely different era now. Generation. We've got a lot younger. The team is much, much younger. And they're going to benefit from this experience. Okay, it's not a positive experience, but you have to go through those crappy times to hopefully get to the point where you've experienced the good times.
It's a gamble, isn't it? It's a gamble.
We all. It's a. What did you say? It's a gamble. It is a gamble, I suppose. But it's not something as supporters, as Arsenal supporters, that we enjoy. However, for me, my view is that we were just naive. We just didn't have that little bit of extra experience to get to deal with the Newcastle away. Because, I mean, they're not a great side. It's Spurs game. You need your Patrick Vieiras, you need your Thierry Henrys, you need your Dennis Bergkamps to come in and settle the youngsters. And for me, we just didn't have that, and we haven't got that. And that's what I hope. That's where I hope Arteta addresses the squad. He brings in that bit of extra experience as well as quality, obviously, but just to get us over that, get us over the line.
But yet we had experienced players that he just got rid of and didn't replace with equally experienced, because you can't expect. It was obvious what was going to happen. I agree with you. It was that lack of experience. And in that Newcastle game and the Spurs game, other games as well, what you needed experienced players to be able to get those young players and push them through over the line. And we didn't. We had experienced players, and Arteta's got rid of them all, pretty much all of them. Jack is the only one left now, isn't he? Really, that's got any sort of experience at the club and experience in football in general.
I don't buy the tired line, because if you're winning, you're not tired, are you? You don't. I don't buy it either. That's why.
Liverpool played 63 games. They weren't tired.
No, but I think they were just mentally just beaten down a little bit. That's just my point of view.
No, you're right. I agree. They were because we lacked leaders and we lacked experience, and he let. I would have kept David Luiz for one more season for his experience. I would have kept Aubameyang until the end of the season in January if we couldn't replace him. And then if even just those two players in that dressing room at the end, even if David Luiz wasn't playing, which he probably wouldn't have been playing, but just to give that experience, I think that could have made a difference, because we wasn't far away in the end. And the reason why we didn't get over the line was mainly for that reason, due to some tactical problems that Arteta hasn't sorted out. But you're right, 13 league defeats, 2 seasons running, does not represent progress to me. It doesn't.
Needs improving. That needs improving, no doubt.
Mitch, let's. I've got my divorce papers here. If we don't get off the air soon, we're going to be. I'm going to be sleeping in the shed with the cat. What's your slant then, Mitch?
I mean, where so many things. Words have certainly been said. I've said it before, but like if you are like watching the season and like where we've been at post Wenger, and you don't think that there's been like a clear progress and improvement, I don't know what you've been watching. Like I feel like the general, just like within the fan base, I feel like it's just been like there's been more unity within the fan base. There's been more Arsenal are fun to watch again. There's so much improvement that's been what?
Not all the time.
Obviously not all the time, but we've made
the unity of the fans. I agree. The unity of the fans has been better this season, 100%. But that's not what we need. If we want to be successful as a team, we need to have better players, and we need a better manager. We need better structure on the pitch as well. That's more important to me than fans singing a few songs.
So I was getting there. I think that Arteta is shown a very, very clear ability that he can be a very, very talented coach. This is his first manager job. So yeah, there's been hiccups. I mean, we saw Willian play false 9 last season. That was painful. We've seen dumb decisions by Arteta. That's a given. But I think we've seen a very, very clear progression in how this team has performed, how this team has grown, and the direction that the Cronkies. There's a very clear direction that the club is heading in from just a managerial side, from the ownership and from the board. A very clear direction philosophically and tactically from Arteta. I do think that there's things he can improve on. Obviously, I do think he's a bit tactically rigid. I do agree with you there. I think that, Lacazette was in the lineup for far too long before a change should have been made, and a change was kind of forced his hand. We can do a better job in doing when we go down in matches, but I don't think that I think that it's abundantly clear, at least to me, and I think many Arsenal fans, that Arteta is a really, really good manager. He's had his issues with some of the players, but none of those players were brought in by him. They were all inherited by Emery, and they were all part of the locker room or the changing room of the Emery that Emery completely lost. That's why we had to get rid of him, is he lost the entire changing room. So I can't really expect a lot of those players to really be players that, oh yes, we really need Matteo Guendouzi, oh we really need Aubameyang right now. after like, oh, they were issues under Emery that persisted or happened again under Arteta. That's not necessarily a surprise. Every single other player talks so highly of Arteta. The reason that they gave him a contract after 3 straight defeats is there's no better stability in football than retaining a manager over a long period of time to really instill a culture, to be able to, like, if you're Bukayo Saka, you've been playing under Arteta and you've had your best seasons under Mikel Arteta, and Arteta has 1 year left on his deal, you're going to start to question, like, okay, there's been like a little bit of interest elsewhere. Maybe I do look to move away if there's a bit of like question marks about the future of the manager position of this club. Like, there's a very clear progression that's been overtaken over Arteta's time here. Like we've had some really, really low lows, but we had some really high highs. We saw this team come back against Wolves, and that was a really, really valuable performance to kind of know where this team is at. It's a really, really disappointing thing to have missed out on Champions League. It sucks, but it does not make the season a failure by any means. I don't think you can call the season a failure when 90% of fans, like, I'm a very optimistic fan, and I predicted us to get 6.
I'll vouch for that.
And they exceeded my expectations, and I have very high expectations, I felt like, as compared to the rest of the fan base in August. So I feel like if you aren't seeing just like the very clear progression that's happening in all aspects of the club, whether that's the ownership, the direction of the club, the manager, the tactics, the players, like the fans, every part of the club is part of this clear progression. And the team will keep improving. And I have no doubts that Arsenal will be back in the Champions League next season. If that's not the case, I think that, yeah, we should have a discussion about Arteta's future within the club. But I think it's like, people will often be like, oh, he finished 8th twice. And it's like, you can't put the first 8th place finish against him by any means, having taken over halfway through the season, having COVID and stuff like that.
I agree.
The second season,
put the second one on him, though.
very, very
put the second 8th place on him, can't we? The first one, maybe not.
Yeah,
the second
100%. You can put the second one on him, and I think I really, really good by the board to have been able to like clearly see the progression in the club that can be sustained when you continue with a manager. And so by continuing with Arteta and showing this faith in Arteta, I think it shows a lot of faith in the players. It's a very young team, so having continuity is very, very important. And then building these blocks and filling these holes in our lineup during this summer is going to be really key for us to have a successful season next season. So I have no doubts that Arteta will be very successful at Arsenal. And I feel like there's a lot of evidence to prove that.
I mean, do you guys think that it's going to be easier to finish top 4 next season than this season, or harder? I think it's going to be harder.
I think in general, the league right now, like last season, is harder than any time Wenger was getting top 4. And it will continue on this path. The league will continue to get harder and harder. We're seeing like teams like Aston Villa show like real like spending and trying to like gain in their positions. We're seeing Newcastle being now the richest team in the world. Like, we really hated the idea of a European Super League, but we're getting an English Super League. Like, it's not going to be far out from now in which some of the like all of the best teams in the world are all in England. There's a reason Haaland went to City and he didn't go to Madrid. And it's because the Premier League is the best league in the world. It will continue to be that, and it's going to continue to get more and more competitive. And if Arsenal wants to keep up, they need to keep a manager that they can see as a clear progression rather than just blowing up an entire project when we haven't seen the fruition of it. Because being Champions League this season would have made us ahead of schedule. I think Europa League is going to be really valuable for our team next season. I think it's a real possibility that we can win that thing. I could not say the same about the Champions League. And I think we're really heading in the right direction.
I'll tell you what, it's been absolutely brilliant. Paul, are you still with us? You're right there, mate. We've got absorbed in this old ruction here about Mr. Arteta.
No,
Guys,
I'm enjoying the conversation, the different viewpoint. It's just fascinating to listen to. And sort of like it's the amount of number of Everton podcasts have been on this season, and be such a different variety of passionate opinions about where the team is and where the progression. So it's great to hear that you guys have the same conversation discussion that we have as Everton fans.
well, it's like being down the pub, isn't it? You're discussing stuff.
Would you take Arteta as your manager ever?
At this moment, Rich?
Well, yeah.
Well, I think at the moment, I'm quite happy.
Big pause there, Paul.
Yeah.
You see, this is my point. Everton struggled against relegation. They wouldn't take him. I spoke to a Newcastle fan in December when they were bottom of the league. They wouldn't have taken him. I spoke to a Burnley fan when Sean Dyche was there. They wouldn't have taken Arteta. Everton don't want Arteta. But why are we happy with him then? When teams fighting relegation don't want him. Why do we want him?
Well, when Ancelotti got the Everton job, and obviously Arteta was being touted as being a possible candidate for that post, I think the feeling of most Everton fans was the guy hasn't got the experience. Now, yeah, obviously I don't watch Arsenal week in, week out, so I can't comment to the same extent that you guys do. Your knowledge, your intimate love of the club and what your expectations are for the team. But if you say to me now, I mean, one thing I would say from my perspective is Arteta's won a trophy at Arsenal. We desperately need a manager who would win a trophy for us. So if he was to be appointed and we were to win a trophy, then the whole picture changes. Right,
guys, I've got to wrap it up. I'm going to be sleeping out in that old shed in a minute if I'm not careful. Got to get the kettle on, make some toast and all that lot. Thanks ever so much. Let's do this again at the end of next season. Let's all come back and then see whether these views are valid or not. Thanks very much.
Wrong, by the way. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope we do finish top four and we go on and win loads of big trophies under Arteta. I really hope I'm wrong.
I'm glad you think you're wrong. I'm glad you hope you're wrong, because there's some Arteta out people who are actively rooting against the club just to prove their own agenda.
Ultimately, I want Arsenal to be successful, like we all do, because that's what we desperately want, right? And if I'm wrong about Arteta and he's the man that brings us this success, I'll be the first one to come here, go anywhere, and say, "Hold my hands up," and say I was wrong about him. I apologise to him, and I'll support him. But I've seen nothing so far in 2.5 years that makes me believe that he is the man to do that for the club. I don't believe he is, but it's still early days. Maybe, I don't know. 2.5 years seems a long time. Some improvements other managers have made a lot quicker with less money. Graham Potter, for example, Patrick Vieira, for example, have made it much more of a clear improvement in a shorter space of time. It took Arteta 2.5 years to basically go nowhere, gets back to where we were at the beginning when he first came, which was finishing 5th, just outside the top 4 by a point or two. So I don't know. Maybe,
guys, it's been a brilliant conversation, but as Putin says, Moscow, rush on. See you later, guys. Thanks ever so much.
See you, everyone.
Cheers, guys.